This is a More Than Just Podcast production.
Welcome to Spotcast, Season 4, Episode 45. My name is Tim Mitchell. I am in Toronto, Ontario, and I'm joined once again by Jonathan Kuline in Mississauga, Ontario.
Hey there, kids.
And we're also joined by Jaime Lopez Jr. in Seattle, Washington.
How's it going?
Going pretty good. Alrighty, so we'll dig right in. We got lots of stuff to cover today. So, first of all, John Winston played Lieutenant Kyle on the original series and also played Commander Kyle on The Wrath of Khan on the Reliant before, the very beginning part there where Chekhov and Captain go down to SETI Alpha 5. Wait, is this SETI Alpha 5 or SETI Alpha 6? Can't remember. Anyway, and then George Samuel Kirk appears in the original series in Operation Annihilate, played the day he died, played by he was killed by I call it a flying sunny side up egg. I don't know if you guys don't remember that episode, but it had the sort of parasites that they look like rubber eggs to me. Played by William Shatner himself with a mustache, which explains why George Samuel Kirk has a mustache on the current version of Strange New Worlds. And Everything Everywhere All at Once was filmed between January 2020 and March 2020. So it was not a pandemic film as I thought maybe it was. It was still things were still open when they were filming that. And then if you haven't seen it yet, it's set to stream, and this is for Jaime, of course, set to stream June 7th, and then Blu-ray will come out on June 14th, 2020. And the reason why I mentioned that some of my friends had seen it, well, they must have gone to South by Southwest, where it was introduced or rolled out in March of 2022. And just as a side note here, I didn't put this in the notes, but I went and saw it on IMAX on the weekend at the Cinesphere, which is where, strangely enough, that's the last episode of Strange New World was filmed. And man, that place is run down. Holy cow. I couldn't really get a good picture of it, but paint's all peeling. It looks like a government, institution that's been neglected for, 20 years now, Jonathan?
Yeah, I was wondering if maybe that was because it looked like an abandoned place on the episode. And I was like, wow, I bet you they didn't have to do much to make it look like that.
Not much. They did Photoshop some clouds in, and that's pretty much it, right? Yeah,
or a second and third dome.
Yeah, but even like the part where they're walking across the roof part, I noticed all the tiles were all peeling up and looked like it needed roof work. That totally looks like exactly like what the place looks like these days.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of nice that it's immortalized because they are going to demolish that thing before long.
Are they?
Yeah, because they want to do the whole restoration down there. They're talking about doing a whole development down there.
Oh, really? I remember, I was a kid when I think 12 when that opened up, and I remember going. I had the T-shirt, and they had all these really cool films, and that's where the sound of chainsaws off in the distance in the forest. That sort of echoey chainsaw off in the distance kind of sound. That's very Canadian forestry kind of sound. That I remember hearing that at some of the sort of films that they did there. And they used to do the multiples, it's one of the styles they did in the 70s where they have these multiple framed shots of parts of, I don't know if you've ever seen that one called the North of Superior movie, the one that was the original Cinesphere film. There's a couple of scenes in there where there's you have this big giant and IMAX screen, and they frame a small regular size, almost like postage stamp kind of view. It was a very much a style back in the day. I remember seeing those films there. But anyway, coming back to the IMAX version of Everything Everywhere All at Once, it's interesting because I wanted to go back and see it because I wanted to because I missed parts of it. I was very tired that day, so I missed parts of the film, and I wanted to go back and sort of put it back in context. And what I noticed was sometimes the framing was full screen IMAX, like the full 4:5 or 4:3 ratio. And then sometimes it was like a letterboxed, as if it was as if they weren't using an IMAX camera. And then other times it had the black bars on the sides. So I think depending on what verse she was in, which multiverse, or whatever, where the characters were in, they changed the framing of the IMAX movie, which is really kind of cool, kind of interesting effect,
Yeah.
And something that you wouldn't really notice, unless you were looking for it like I was, but it might be something that would subconsciously affect you, so your brain would go, oh, this is a different view of things, right? So kind of cool trick.
Neat.
You know what I mean, right? By you see that in movies all the time now.
Yeah.
With IMAX. but only see it in IMAX because you can't get the cut anywhere else, right? So yeah, cool. Yeah, I got to throw over to Jonathan, and Jaime and I are going to go take a break while he tells us what we talked about wrong last episode.
Listen, if I take a week off, this happens. Okay, just a couple things to fact check from last week when I wasn't here. So you guys were talking
By the way,
about...
we commented on the fact that you weren't here and we were making mistakes as we went, just for the record.
Yeah, it's fair. You guys were specifically saying, who would know this? Jonathan. He'll fix it for us. I was like, all right, yeah, fair. Okay, so... Daredevil, the new TV show that is apparently coming to Disney Plus, is going to be showrun by Matt Corman and Chris Ord. Those two did not work on the previous show. So these are new guys. You guys weren't sure if they were the old guys who did the last show. They did not. So now you know. She-Hulk. So you were talking about She-Hulk. The new She-Hulk trailer dropped, and was she, back and forth. So in the comic books, when she originally debuted, she could transform back and forth between a human and She-Hulk. But in very famous graphic novel, one of the first sort of high format magazine-sized graphic novels that Marvel did, She-Hulk is exposed to a very high dose of radiation, and that leaves her permanently stuck as She-Hulk. So she's no longer able to become Jennifer Walters anymore.
So when she transitioned back and forth before the big radiation burst or whatever, or that story arc, did she could consciously do it, or only when she got angry like Bruce Banner?
No, she was always a lot more lucid, and I think the explanation was that she was exposed to his blood, not to his level of radiation, so it wasn't necessarily the rage that triggered it for her. It was more something she could do. And I checked my reference material, the official handbook of the Marvel Universe. We were talking about how big she's supposed to be. In last episode, you guys were talking about how big she's supposed to be, and the book lists her at 6'7", 650 pounds.
That's a lot of pounds.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea is she's supposed to be like very muscular, very dense. Mm-hmm. So,
okay,
yeah,
heavy bones, strong bones.
Yeah, I think all of it is supposed to be like, solid as a rock. You guys were talking about Doctor Who and the fact that Donna and the Doctor from that era are coming back, and so I included the link here that we can put into our show notes outlining the history of Donna Noble. And yes, you are correct that in fact she did have Doctor-esque powers for a while there. I think it's a bit of a stretch to say she was the Doctor, but she certainly had all the abilities of the Doctor for a bit.
Right. And she was originally the runaway bride, and
she was, yeah.
And did she wear the bride's outfit for several episodes, or just one?
I think she wore it for the first few, and then she makes the decision that she's going to stay, and then she's not anymore.
Right. Okay.
And Jaime, you were mentioning the creator of the Fairly Odd Parents and fishing for the gentleman's name. I think you got Harmon, but his first name is Butch Harmon.
Ah, got it. This is the Harmon's hips thing we were talking about.
That's exactly right, yeah.
Why animated moms are so thick with a double C.
Which, by the way, made me laugh my butt off. So I'm a fan. I'm a fan of the podcast.
All right. Well, we're heading to the headlines, and you're up again, John.
Here I am. Yeah, so I just sort of threw a whole bunch of the Star Wars Celebration news in here, and we can sort of chit-chat through a bunch of this. So in no particular order, they have announced two new shows. They dropped a couple new trailers, a new video game, and a new Lego special. So we'll try and tackle all this in some order. So first and foremost, new live-action show, Star Wars Skeleton Crew, was unveiled on day one of Star Wars Celebration. Mm-hmm. Was
that on the 25th, by the way?
It was yesterday, so it was the 26th.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And then today was day two, and there's more news that came out of that. So Skeleton Crew was announced. So Jude Law is going to be the star. So that's a nice get for the Disney Marvel folks, Jude Law. And he is going to be headlining this series that is supposed to launch in 2023. And it is going to be, it has been created and run by John Watts, who famously, we were just talking about a few episodes back, the creator of Spider-Man No Way Home and the trilogy of Spider-Man movies. he was the one who backed out of doing the Fantastic Four movie, and we were like, huh, that's a strange thing for John Watts to do. Well, now we know what he's doing next. So John Watts is going to team up with Chris Ford and Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, and they're going to do this new show, and it's apparently going to follow a group of 10-year-old kids from a small planet who get lost in the galaxy far, far away. Ooh. And it takes place after Return of the Jedi and in the same timeline as Mandalorian and Ahsoka. So, yeah, new series. Cool. Sounds cool. Thoughts?
Sounds cool.
Yeah, it does. And I was kind of thinking about Jude Law as an actor because HBO Max has emailed me and says, hey, guess what? Secrets of Dumbledore streaming on HBO Max starting May 30th. That'll be Monday from now. And I canceled my subscription probably half a week ago because I was only there for the Batman. I'm kind of considering resubscribing to get not necessarily Secrets of Dumbledore, but really trying to get to the stuff I didn't get around to, like Barry and Winning Time and a few other things that Jonathan had recommended. So maybe
I love that I have this influence on your life. This is very exciting.
Yeah, it's like well, maybe we got the long holiday weekend for us. It's Memorial Day weekend, so it's a 3-day weekend for us. I'm like maybe I'll do that then.
There you go.
Yeah.
So we've got also got our first trailer for Andor, the series that is a prequel to Rogue One, which is in turn a prequel to the original trilogy. So it's a prequel of a prequel. Try and choke on that one for a while. Mm-hmm. It does look pretty cool, though. I must admit, I really did like the Andor character from Rogue One. Just the idea of a character working on the side of light who has to live in the dark is always a good one. It's good in spy movies. It's good in all those sort of type of men of mystery kind of movies. But the sort of general thing about the rebellion has always been like, well, they're the good guys fighting against the bad guys who are the Empire. And I liked that, like, when they introduced Cassian Andor in Rogue One, one of the first things we see him do is realize, like, oh, I could probably escape here, but my source is going to get caught and he's going to rat me out. And he just kills the guy. Yeah. In Rogue One. And it tells you everything you need to know about him in that one scene where he's like, I'm a man with a mission. I've been tasked to do this, and I will do whatever it takes. And we see that come to fruition, which, spoilers, you haven't seen Rogue One. Frankly, if you haven't seen Rogue One, why are you listening to us? But, in the end, he fulfills that to the point where he's willing to die for the cause.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of like it also gives an interesting side to the rebellion that they're not, that they will do what they have to do, right?
Well, that some people certainly will, right?
Yeah, not just him, but it would have been like, you always think of Princess Leia as being white and pure and whatever, and yet she would have been, as general, instructing people like Cassian Andor or that other goof, Poe Dameron, to do what they need to do, right? Which they're at war, so they have to do what they have to do, right? They can't be goody two shoes all the time, right?
Yeah, but then my interpretation was always it was him and like the one general that he was working for. It struck me that they were the ones who were willing to get their hands dirty, so she wouldn't have to. Right.
Right. Well, no, that's exactly the point, though. It's like the song from Pink Floyd that says, the old man sits to the back and tells the kids at the front what to do, right?
Yeah, exactly right. What did you guys think of the trailer?
Looked good.
Yeah, I do wonder if they'll pull a Better Call Saul for this as a prequel, and that maybe he will start out relatively idealistic and squeaky clean, and progressively have to, shed a little bit of his cleanliness to get to the point at which we see him in Rogue One, and give him an arc that way.
Yeah, actually, I like that idea. That's good. See, you should be writing for this stuff.
They better call Saul, but Star Wars. Okay, go. What's the next one?
Okay, go.
Yeah, Better Call Saul with lightsabers.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I do wonder if there will be sort of cameos and appearances from familiar faces. I wonder if we'll see K2SO from his sort of famous robot sidekick.
Speaking of which, good segue, John.
Well, I tried to set you up as best I can.
Thank you. So, and this was a bit clickbaity when I first saw it, and I don't think I can't remember if I got this before the day came out or it was just yesterday. But yeah, this clickbaity title talking about how Cassio or Andor series is a little different than perhaps fans would have thought, in the fact that they've only talked about 2 seasons, and so we're not really sure if it's only going to run 2 seasons or not, but that Alan Tudyk, who plays K2SO, is not going to be in the first 6 episodes, I guess, if they're going to do them 6-episode seasons like they've been doing. And he's going to be in the second one, and they really haven't talked beyond that. So it was kind of a... the article talks about how the showrunner was kind of spilling the beans in a sense that way, right? We don't know at this point in time. I mean, Alan Tudyk is not connected to the project, so it's a pretty safe bet he's not going to be in the first 6 episodes, right? So, but that's not to say that they're not pursuing him for the second. He's busy doing Resident Alien right now, and obviously, doing guest spots on.
How much? Really, you can record that on your iPhone. You don't have. He's just doing a voice. It's not like he has to be there,
Well, yeah. He has to emote.
Oh, right. They have to glue ping pong balls to him.
But I was pretty sure that who's the lady that played the other robot from Fleabag?
Oh, Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Yeah.
Yeah, they were actually on. Apparently, they were on the set.
Oh yeah, I think they were wearing the ping pong balls so they could act off them. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Over to you, John.
Okay.
Mandalorian.
Mandalorian, yeah. So we weren't sure. They had a bit of a weird announcement a couple weeks back where they were saying Mandalorian will come late 2022 or early 2023, and which was a little cryptic. And I believe this last season debuted on like the 29th or 30th or something like that, right? It was really late in the year. But they did finally confirm at Celebration this week that Mandalorian Season 3 is coming in February. So we know we're going to get more Grogu action. It's not until February, so.
But isn't Grogu off with Luke right now? Oh, no, he came back.
No, because he Book of Boba Fett, right? Yeah. So, yeah.
Right, sure.
Yep. The other thing they announced was a sequel to Fallen Order, Star Wars Fallen Order, which is a very popular video game, which is going to be called Star Wars Jedi Survivor, and it is the next chapter in the adventures of Cal Kestis. So lots of people keen on this one, and of course it's going to be on the next generation systems. So yeah, looks cool. They've got a little teaser trailer up, which you can have a look at in our show notes, and yeah, it looks pretty cool.
And you can't run this on PS4? You have to have a PS5?
I don't know. They may release it for both, because PS4 is still a valuable system for them, so they might put it out on both.
Right.
Or they might put it out just on the 5 and say, hey, if you want to play, you gotta go to the 5.
Isn't that how they sold the 4?
Yeah, well, that's how they sell every generation, right? They start putting out exclusives, so you're stuck with it. More Star Wars stuff. A new Lego Star Wars special was announced. It's Lego Star Wars Summer Vacation, a very funny piece of art up with the Death Star looking like a beach ball sitting on the beach. Very funny. And a new kids-aimed show, Star Wars Young Jedi Adventures, which is not only going to air on Disney Plus, it's also going to air on Disney Junior. So it's clearly aimed at a younger audience.
So it's definitely not going to cover Order 66, right?
Young Jedi Adventures to me did not say pew 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 and chop 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 to the little ones, but
okay. Never know.
Yeah.
Your blast shields down, folks.
That's right. Also part of this announcement bonanza at Celebration, even though it's not Star Wars, they dropped the first trailer for the new Willow Disney Plus series, which I know I am pretty excited about. I was always a huge fan of the Willow movie, and it's kind of thrilling to see Warwick Davis and the magical world that he first graced us with back in the 80s, and I gotta admit, I'm kind of excited about that one.
Yeah, he now looks like the wizened old wizard or what.
Well, it's funny because Billy Barty played like the wizened old man in the first one, but he looked like he was like 1,000. So yeah.
Sure. true. Yeah.
But yeah, it looks epic and grand and beautiful, and you know, I must admit, that's as high on my radar as anything from any other genre stuff that we're fans of. I'm probably more excited for a Willow series than I am for a new Lord of the Rings series. So,
do we know if Kevin Pollak is coming back to voice the little people?
Yeah, I don't know. And are we going to see the very quiet Mad Mardigan? Like, yeah. How are they gonna play that?
Yeah, well, his son could do the voice, right?
Yeah, who knows? And yeah, of course, it's famously the antagonist from the first one was Jodie Whaley, who ended up marrying Val Kilmer. So they're no longer together. I don't know if she's going to be on there or he's going to be on there, but yeah, could be interesting.
Cool.
Yeah. Another trailer dropped this week. We got a longer and a little more plot-focused trailer for Thor, the Love and Thunder version of Thor. And this time we actually got a look at Christian Bale's Gore the God Butcher and a little bit more of the female version of Thor that we just got a cameo of in the first trailer. So what were your impressions, guys? What did you think of Gore?
I'll let Jaime go. I didn't watch it. I'm watching it now.
I'm not familiar with the comics character, but looking at this, the few other media properties came to mind. 300, or the very heavily stylized scenes that he's in that look like a totally different film. So it'll be interesting to see how it fits in. And the the God Butcher thing kind of felt a little bit of like Kratos from God of War, the PlayStation games.
Yep.
Yeah. Seemed neat. I mean, it's just like another Christian Bale, like, holy crap, that's him kind of role, you know?
Yeah, I saw a very funny meme going around this week on the socials with the line from Batman is, if you live long enough, you see yourself become the villain. And they had a picture of Christian Bale as Batman, and then of Gore, and then a picture of Michael Keaton as Batman, and then him of the Vulture. And they just kept alluding to the fact that they just keep capturing old DC villains and making them into DC heroes and making them into villains in the Marvel universe, which is funny. But it looks. I will say, as I've read that whole arc in the comics, which is well worth the time to read. It's funny because in the comics, the Gore arc is very much a Thor story, like the traditional Odin's son Thor, and then 2 years later is followed by the female Thor Jane Foster storyline. So here they're kind of mushing about 5 years worth of Thor stories into one 2-hour plus movie. So it'll be interesting to see how they sort of work some of those comic book aspects. Obviously, they still have not done a literal comic book adaptation. They always sort of, take the basic notes and start playing jazz with it. But it'll be interesting to see which elements they keep and which they don't. Again, we talked about in the last trailer how there are some scenes in there that are verbatim from the comic books from Asad Ribich's art. It'll be interesting to see how much they actually lift from the story versus what they make up for the MCU.
Well, it looks interesting. I just watched it in silence, but
Yeah, I mean, Taika Waititi's movies tend to be fun and funny, and it'll be interesting to see how. I mean, Gore in the comics is scary as hell. He is not like a messing around kind of character. He is everything he's advertised as. It'll be interesting to see if he piles up the body count in the movie that he does in the book, because in the book he is horrifying. A couple quick ones. The star of the next Hunger Games was announced. So this one made me laugh. This is the guy who played Billy the Kid. So Tom Blythe is going to play the young Coriolanus Snow, who was played by Donald Sutherland in the previous movies, and was the star in this prequel novel that came out a couple years back called The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. So yeah, more Hunger Games are a-coming. I don't know. I must admit, I got the audiobook of this, but have not had a chance to listen to it. It always gets bumped down my priority list, but I don't know. Prequels, I mean, we'll talk more about prequels when we get around to our main section. We're pretty much
prequeled out. Yeah.
Prequels are kind of, there's a lot of them, and very few of them are done as well as I would like them to be. So I don't know. I'm taking a wait and see approach on this one.
It'd be nice if they find new stories, like rather than trying to drag us into these, prequel kind of things all the time, right?
Yeah. Although, again, as an advocate of let's get over the prequels, I would like to guard against that by saying sometimes sequels aren't so good either. Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Coriolanus, by the way, is a famous ballet. I wonder. I don't know the story because obviously Carol would know better than me. But it's one of the ones that she goes and sees quite regularly. Like it's they have like 5 stories in ballet that they do over and over again, and that's one of them.
Something that and something about a duck or a swan or something.
Well, I wonder what the point of giving him the name Coriolanus Snow is. That's anything related to the ballet.
All right, there's your research project.
If you're a ballet fan and you're listening to the show, please feel free to tell us, because otherwise we'll never know, unless I remember to ask Carol.
Yeah. And the last thing I've got is the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which was a movie that came out, like 2003, so almost 20 years ago, with Sean Connery, of course, as the star. They are rebooting it for Hulu. So, again, it's a good concept. It's an amazing book. It's Alan Moore. It's so good. I highly recommend reading the book. He basically took all of these public domain characters from famous literary stories and imagined if they were to get together and form a superhero team. So Captain Nemo and Alan Quatermain and the Invisible Man and Mina Harkness and Dr. Jekyll / Mr. Hyde, and it is like very darkly funny, twisted. The movie that they made played it very straight. It was like, we're a superhero team, we do superhero things, and it was not good. I hope that if they're going to go to the effort of making this, that perhaps they might take a little bit more of the spirit of the book in which it was intended, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah. Cool. All right, so this main part of the show, we'll start talking about something Star Trek related, even though we just spent like an hour talking about Star Wars. We'll go back to Star Wars in a minute. Just, bear with us while we just, go back to the real purpose of the show. And we're talking about Strange New Worlds, Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and I'm going to do the recap as quickly as I can so we can get to the main part of the show, which is, of course, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Just kidding, of course. So we start off, Memento Mori is season 1, episode 4, show of Strange New World, and we start off with Security Officer's Log, Stardate 3177.3. That's La'ana talking, and she's talking about how they're on Enterprise is on their way to Finibus 3 to bring supplies, upgrades, air scrubbers, and that kind of stuff to the planet where these researchers are working. And of course, it happens to be Starfleet Remembrance Day, which is kind of interesting that Monday is Memorial Day in the States. But and so most of the crew are wearing these pins which commemorate their remembrance of fallen comrades and ships that people have given given the ultimate sacrifices, they like to call it. And so we see Uhura and walking down the hallway talking to Hammer, and she's currently working in Enterprise as she's a cadet and gets to try different parts of the ship. And Hammer's sort of doubting her, spouting off in her quick answers to the questions he's giving her, as implying that she hasn't studied, at which point she just rattles off a whole bunch of technical jargon, prove that in fact she has done the reading that he'd expected her to do. And he sort of disses her again, or disses cadets in general, saying they all see Enterprise as a path to the bridge and command, and she sort of says, no, I'm really enjoying this. And he goes, well, you'll have to prove it to me. And so obviously that's the B plot of this story. And La'ana runs into Una, and she's not wearing her remembrance pin, at which point Una remarks on that. And, I think La'ana implies that, she's been through such a rough time that, she tries not to think about what goes in the past. And she does a bit more exposition throughout the show. I wasn't going to touch on, but the sort of the reason why she doesn't, mince words and she's very blunt with the staff is because she doesn't feel that, she's been so battered and bruised that she just feels being just straightforward and blunt with people is the way to go. So they arrive at the planet, and there's no welcome wagon, as Christopher Pike says, and so they hail them, and of course there's no response, and they're trying to figure out why, and there's a brown dwarf nearby, and they wonder if that's jamming the signals, and Spock says no, it's because the comm satellite is not there, it's been destroyed. So there's no way to communicate with the planet. So Una and La'ana and a few other people beam down to the planet to investigate, and they find that there should be hundreds of people. There's like nobody there, and they look around. There's blessed marks. It looks like conflict, and like as if the crew or the scientists have sort of escaped the planet somehow really quickly. But then they find there's like all kinds of blood, and bodies have been dragged away. There's just basically blood stains everywhere. And so they make the assumption that they were attacked and brutalized and that kind of stuff. And meanwhile, a ship appears in orbit, and it's kind of cloaked, and it's not got a Federation signal. So Pike says, we're beaming you up because we don't know what the intention of the ship is, and it doesn't look good. So we do that. The ship turns out to be full of scientists that have escaped from the planet, and they're on a cargo vessel, and because of it's meant to carry uranium and radioactive materials, they can't transport, like they can't use the transporters to get them off, so they have to figure out. So our Captain Pike suggests they connect the tube, like so they can transport people, like a bridge kind of thing, to manually have people walk off the ship and onto the Enterprise. And so they look around. Before they do that, Spock scans around, finds there's no warp signals, no other vessels, and no signs of other vessels in the area. So as they're transferring people, La'ana starts talking to a couple of the survivors and meets a little girl who apparently saw them or may have seen them, and she asks what did she see, and the little girl she didn't really see them, but she heard them make some sort of clicking noises with their tongues, and so she makes the noises, and of course in La'ana's mind you see this is triggering a memory in her. And she immediately stands up and says, "Scan for polarized EM signatures," because they're obviously using some sort of cloaking device or something to mask the fact that they're there. And she says, "Immediately raise shields," and because Spock does find that there is in fact a holographic representation of a moon, I think he said, and so they realize that's where the ships that attack the planet are hiding, and. Lana's like convinced it's the Gorn because based on the clicking noise and sort of her experience of having been attacked by the Gorn in the past, she yells at them to raise shields, and of course they can't because they got this tube attached to them to the other ship, and so of course then the Gorn starts attacking them, and they realize that the Gorn was waiting for them to expose themselves to I'm skipping ahead a bit, but that's why they got attacked, is that the Gorn was waiting for them to let their guard down and be more conscious about trying to rescue these people than to really defend themselves. But in La'ana's mind, she keeps seeing this smiling face, this sort of character she imagines smiling at her, and this is something that. So meanwhile, they get attacked. There's all kinds of damage, and people are injured on the tube. So Nurse Chapel is running around rescuing people, and Una turns out she's got huge, she got hit with shrapnel or something in her abdomen area, so she's like bleeding, and she's injured, and she's got to go to sick bay or something. And she says to La'ana, "If you're okay, you need to go up to the bridge, and they need you up there." Meanwhile, Hemmer is securing something in the bay. I gotta look further down to see what it's called. I think it is. I kind of called it Thingy for a while because I missed the name of it. It's an AP350 or an AP360 device, some sort of reactor thingy that they just leave loose on the cargo bay for some reason. I don't know. Maybe just because it's a plot point. And it makes a good.
It's called the MacGuffin 2000.
Yeah, the MacGuffin 2000. That's the one. Yeah.
They have. Harness points. They could strap everything down, but they're like, nah, that's cool. We're the guys that keep all this crap in the back of a pickup truck, not strapped down, not covered with a tarp, and just going down the highway at full speed. That's what they do in the shuttle bay. Into
like an area where they can contain it damage or whatever. But anyway, it's a good MacGuffin, as it were. So they're there, and so Hemmer needs to secure this thing on the cargo bay, and her and him are on the cargo bay trying to do that. And And they've been attacked. The ship gets attacked, and they get blasted a bit more. The engines have been damaged. They can't get to warp, partly because of this MacGuffin that he has to fix. And I love the autocorrect here. It says can't fight the Horn. So they can't. La'ana is insisting that they can't fight the Gorn. They're just relentless. They'll just completely they won't stop coming. And part of their strategy is to just use up all your resources by making your life difficult to the point where you're tired out, and then they can just take you over. So she's insisting that they have to run away and find cover.
I had a girlfriend like that once. Just saying.
What's that?
Just used you up, wore you out, and eventually took you over.
Yeah.
Anyone else? No?
Treated you like a god. She basically took care of you until you were Thor. Is that right?
Yes, something like that.
Anyway, and then I'm trying to figure out which one that was. Anyway, so they decide that they got the brown dwarf on the edge is somewhere they can go and hide, and so Pike's asking around, like, can we not just go hide inside that thing, and what's the danger of it? And Spock points out that it's on the edge of a black hole. Of course it is, right? And so they have to be really careful about how far they go into it, and the danger of the red brown dwarf, because it's a collapsing star, is that it's going to have a huge gravity pull and could damage the ship as well. And the sensors won't work inside there, and neither will the shields. And so Pike's like, yeah, it's perfect. Let's go there because, it'll also affect the Gorn's sensors and engines and ships and whatever. And of course, Ortega's like, oh, yeah, let's head into the great giant cloud of death. And why not, sort of thing. So that's what they head off to. And as they're heading down there, they keep getting blasted by the Gorn, and the cargo bay gets hit and damaged, and in the melee or the collateral damage, as it were, a hammer smashes his hand, so you can't use his right hand, kind of thing, and so he and Uhura are trapped on, and of course the door's blocked by all the debris and stuff like that, so they can't get off, and so they have to solve this, figure out the MacGuffin thing, figure out why it's. Make it so it can't blow up. They need to secure it, and of course, if they don't, it'll be like an atomic bomb going off, kind of thing. And so Uhura's going to have to be his eyes and ears and hands, as it were, to try and get this thing under control. Meanwhile, over in sickbay, they're all damaged and battered and bruised, and they've got all their equipment is down, and Mbega says it's basically triage. The med beds aren't working. They can't synthesize, resources like plasma or things. So they basically need supplies in order to survive this situation, right? And Una shows up. She's, worse off than she thought. And they examine her stomach and find out that she needs surgery right away. And luckily, Nurse Chapel has studied, what do they call it? Archaeological medicine. And so she and Mbega decide that they're going to sew up Una's wounds, the old-fashioned way, like we do now, right? And they're sort of summarizing, what kind of weapons they have after being attacked, and they've only got one torpedo, and they have no weapons. So they're basically, SOL, as it were. So, and again, Alana, who's like the harbinger of doom and gloom, explains that the Gorn are monsters and they won't give up, and the Federation wants to get to understand the new people and enemies and befriend them, and she's like, you can't do that with the Gorn. You're just prey to them, and they're just going to keep coming and attack no matter what you do. And so Pike says, well, we need to sort of start thinking about what we're going to do, so we all need to get creative. And just as they're leaving the ready room, he says to Lana, how you doing? Like, how you holding up and that kind of stuff. And he's like, is there anything you can remember about your experience with the Gorn? Because she's one of the few humans that's actually lived to see the Gorn. Most people who see the Gorn don't live long enough to talk about it. And so she says, well, I do have memories, but they're all fragmented because there's a lot of repressed memories in there. And this is a part where she explains about why she's so bitter with people and just straightforward and doesn't, tend to smile and tell happy stories when she's talking to the crew. She said something about like the enemy doesn't expect her to have emotions, so she doesn't have any, or she doesn't have any feelings. So it goes. And then so they're in the middle of this brown dwarf's cloud, and nothing's working, and they decide to they're sort of spitballing what they could do. But meanwhile, I skipped the part where they go back to the cargo bay, and of course, Uhura is trying to key into the keypad to try and stabilize this thing, and of course it's not working. So that's something they just show real quick. So back on the bridge, they're trying to think around things, and Spock says, we can use a navigation which has equipment, not quite, they don't call it sensors, but it has this equipment to basically figure out their position in the cloud and stabilize them and that kind of stuff. And he says, we could sort of rejig that to create a sort of rudimentary sensor, and we can locate where the Gorn are, right? And so he goes, way to be creative, Spock. And so they as they do that, they realize that there's a single Gorn ship that's heading straight for them, and they're kind of freaking out a bit. And Pike's like, stay the course, don't move, just stay where you are, don't make any sudden moves, as it were. And the ship basically flies right by them. And so Pike realizes that they can see them, but the Gorn has no idea where they are, and so he says, what we'll do is let's get that torpedo ready. Well, we can't fire the torpedo in this cloud because we have no idea where it's going to go, and it's not going to have any sensors, so it could just go off in random things and might even come back and hit us. So Pike explains, we're not gonna launch it. We're just gonna drop it on them. So we'll position ourselves over top of them and drop it. And
can we talk about gravity in space just for 1 second?
Well, hang on. It's not so much. Yeah, they do have to push it. You're right. Well, yeah, but don't forget. They're actually in a gravity well, right? So there is gravity where they are, right? They're using their navigation sensors to keep them from going into.
But isn't this a massive vortex? Like, I would really like if there are any physics professors who listen to our show, if you could please explain the probability of this. I think it's extremely
there's a whole lot of there's a whole lot of suspension of disbelief. We'll get into the sort of the more innocuous stuff in a little bit too. But yeah, so you remember Jaime talked about on a previous episode how the ships are always facing each other in the same directions. They're never askew or coming at strange angles. They always in this three-dimensional space, the Vulcan ship or the Romulan ship and the Enterprise are always nose to nose.
Yeah, and all the planets are on the same plane for some reason.
Yeah, exactly. So, but in this case here, just to satisfy Jaime, they come and they tilt at a 90-degree axis, so they're facing downward, I guess, into the. They don't really explain this very well, but in the show. But now that I think about it, they're facing towards the where the gravity is, and they put themselves on the other side, and they put the Gorn underneath them, so they open the torpedo door. Yeah, pod bay door. They open the torpedo door, and I don't know if they push the thing out or they just sort of let it drop or whatever, but yeah, it kind of just flip-flops, and eventually it actually does hit the ship and blow up. I figured, what are they going to do, like a remote trigger or something? I don't know.
No, I figured it was go flush your toilet, ball up some toilet paper, and try to hit something that's in there. Right, that's kind of what they were doing. They were letting the gravity swirl it into them down the black hole.
Is this like the I don't know if you've seen this in bars and stuff like that, where you go into the bar and to control the drunk people's urine spray, they put a little soccer net in there with a little ball, and you have to aim to try and hit the ball into the net. Never seen that? No. Okay. Things you have to entertain males who are drunk, folks. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about. So fortunately they managed to, with the one shot that they had, they managed to hit this other ship, and the sensors, the ship disappears, so they assume the ship has been blown up, and of course they're like, oh, that was great, we did it, yay, high five. And then they realize, oh, wait a minute, that might not have been a good thing, because now the Gorn know where they are, right? And so a giant ship and two other smaller Gorn ships start coming towards them, because now that they basically revealed, it's like they always say second on a match or third on a match. When you're in the trenches and you're lighting cigarettes, don't be the third guy, because then the snipers know where to shoot. Yep, because they see the flame. So they realize it's a trap, and so then they have to decide they have to go deeper into the dwarf, deeper into the gravity. Pike's convinced that their ship is going to be able to hold up better than the Gorn. I mean, it's interesting that, the Gorn isn't just a standard cylinder type ship. It's kind of this weird sort of, shapy thing, like a Booker's ship kind of thing. It isn't quite a straightforward ship, right, sort of thing. It's kind of like a spiral, right? And he just guesses that they're going to be less likely to handle the gravity than the Enterprise would, right? I based on what I know about physics and construction and stuff, I think the Gorn ship probably would have survived better than the Enterprise, to be honest with you. But because the Enterprise has got a whole bunch of flat, the saucer's a flat disk area, which would take has a lot of surface area for gravity to affect. But anyway, I digress. So they decided to go deeper into the thing, and this is when we learned. I don't know if we learned Ortega's first name before, but he calls her Erica, right? As he tells her to go deeper into the dwarf, and she's concerned they'll get squished, and they decide that the lower decks of the ship will be most susceptible to the squishing compression, so they decide to evacuate the lower deck. And as they do this, the ship starts creaking, and people on the sick bay and all that kind of stuff, and then on the cargo bay are hearing the metal creaking, and they're all freaking out. Meanwhile, Uhura back on the cargo bay, speaking of which, manages to fix the panel, and she's able to now get to figure out which of the cores are ones she can replace. And of course, she touches one, and he's like, "I didn't say touch it. Just find the warm ones or cold ones, because the cold ones are the ones that they can replace. Those are the ones that are not working properly." And so she manages to get one off, and he's like, "Remove it carefully." So she removes it carefully, and then she's like waving it around. "Look at that! I did this." I'm thinking, anyway, whatever. Anyway, so they decide that Pike is sitting back on the bridge, and they're running out of time in terms of like the lower decks getting, if the lower decks do squish, they'll decompress, and damage will be greater, and so Pike decides to close the bulkheads, and as he does that, one of the crew members ends up on the wrong side of the bulkhead and gets dead. Meanwhile, his ploy did work, because one of the enemy ships that was nearby does manage to squish, because it follows him too far into the thing. Now, I forgot to look this up, but there's an episode. You know who Mark Leonard is, right?
Yep, Sarek.
Yeah, he played Sarek, but he also, before he played Sarek, he played a Romulan commander, or a commander on a ship, and he and they attack a planet, and because this part reminded me, this whole thing with the other ships coming towards them and not being able to find each other, and very rudimentary sensors, reminded me of that episode with Mark Leonard, where Kirk is chasing Mark Leonard's ship, I think into the neutral zone or something like that, but it's a sort of cat and mouse kind of, one commander versus another commander trying to outthink each other, kind of like, almost like a Hunt for Red October kind of deal, where they're trying to anticipate what the other person's doing, and sort of battle tactics. And that was very much something that they did, not often, but they did that well on the original Star Trek series. And this sort of cat and mouse game that they played with, not being able to see the other ships, and trying to see who's, almost like a game of Battleship, where dropping bombs where they think the enemy might be, kind of thing, that this reminded me very much of that episode, in terms of just the way it felt and the way it was written, kind of part, right? So, and which is kind of like, it's interesting that this Stranger New World is taking on more of the sort of original Star Trek kind of tropes, right? To do this kind of stuff. Anyway, so back in sickbay, they determine they need more plasma, and Una's needs surgery. She's got a few pieces of shrapnel in her that they need to go deeper, close to her abdominal aorta. I don't know if that's a thing, or if it's just a thing on Una. But
is that an Illyrian thing?
Yeah, maybe. I think so. I don't know. It's where her third heart is, or something like that. Like the Doctor, she's got two hearts, right? Anyway, so they decide that they're going to need to sedate her, and she's going to need a lot of plasma if they have to go in and do like a deep surgery. And as they're doing that, one of the nurses, yells out, "Hey, this other person needs plasma as well," and they only have enough plasma for one person. So Una, on her deathbed, orders Mbega to give the plasma to the other crew member, right? Crew person, they're calling them on this show, by the way. And so then, meanwhile, back on the bridge, Spock is like looking at the instruments and saying, "We can't stay here, any longer." Of course, I don't know. I went and saw Dr. Brian Cox talk about the cosmos a couple of weeks ago in person, and he gave us a big long story about, told us all about the different parts of the galaxy and how there's a black hole. I don't know if you guys saw the black hole that was published a couple of weeks ago, where it was a few days before the picture was published. They knew they had the picture, they're just waiting for it to develop. There's a black hole in the middle of the Milky Way, for example, right? And they've taken pictures of black holes.
Have a good night's sleep, kids.
Yeah, but what he was saying was that, before the sun, like our sun, is eventually going to collapse in on itself, and it's going to destroy our solar system in 1 billion years. Okay, so you got some time. You can afford to get the new iPhone, 14 or whatever it is, if 16, because it's going to be a while before your planet's going to blow up. It is eventually going to happen, but in the story, this is where you were talking about physics earlier, John. The red dwarf, or this brown dwarf, is being dragged into the black hole faster than they anticipated it would be. And they only have an hour and 32 minutes and 48 seconds before this is going to happen.
Yep, they got there just in time.
Exactly. Remember the part I just told you a minute about 1 billion years before Earth is destroyed. Anyway. Start working on the spaceship plans now, folks. Because we're Battlestar Galactica. We're going to have to get the F out of here. Anyway.
Wasn't that an episode of Doctor Who, too?
Yeah. Well, my favorite thing is Corner Gas. Have you ever seen Corner Gas, Jaime? Jaime? Is your name Jaime?
Corner Gas.
It's a Canadian comedy. It's about a gas station out in Saskatchewan. Anyway, one of there's a gas station and there's a cafe, right? And on the cafe is a big giant CAFE, right? Like spelling the word cafe out there. And there's a big giant windstorm, and it blows around, knocks the town around, and it blows away the letter E and the letter F off of the cafe. And the Rosie, the owner of the cafe, says, "Where's my F and E?" Okay, never mind. Anyway, so they decide that that they can't really. They need to take a peek out and to find out where the Gorn is and or something like that. I can't remember what this next MacGuffin was about, but they need to figure out. They can't do it in the Enterprise because the Enterprise is going to get seen and the Gorn will attack them and they all die. And what's the point, right? So La'ana decides that if we take a shuttle, we can go out and do whatever it is we need to do and figure out what we had to figure out. Again, I never did get to what they could figure out. But Spock says, no, I'll go with you. So, and of course they take the Galileo. That's the first time we've heard the Galileo mentioned on this show. Another famous star from the original series. I don't know if you know the story behind the Galileo. They used the transporters originally because they couldn't have a spaceship. They didn't have the budget to land a spaceship on a planet. That's why they invented the transporters. Well, they eventually got the budget to build the Galileo, right? And that's how the Galileo came into being. So yeah, I think there's an episode where Spock was down. Another one of these sort of unseen enemy kind of episodes. I think Mbenga and Spock are stuck on the Galileo down on the planet. And it's sort of like everybody's questioning Spock's ability to command because he's so logical and that kind of stuff, right? Anyway, so they notice, again, I don't know how they notice this. I guess they're in the shuttle, but they notice that the big ship, the big Gorn ship and the little Gorn ship are sort of facing each other and they're blasting each other with like scans, right? And they're trying to figure out, they're looking at them going, why are they scanning each other? And then Lana says, I vaguely remember seeing something like those kind of lights when I was a kid, like when the Gorn was attacking us. It's something's coming to my mind, but I can't place it. I can't figure it out. And he says, "Hey, you Vulcan guys, you have that trick thing that you can do." Which at this point in time, I don't know that in the original series, Kirk didn't know that in season 1, Kirk didn't know that Spock could do a mind meld. That came later, right?
Just because Kirk spent too much time chasing girls in Starfleet Academy and didn't study up on Vulcan physiology.
That's true. Anyway, again, it was the mind meld was another one of these sort of tricks that they came up with in the middle of the writing of that series, the original series, that is. But so Spock agrees to do a mind meld with her and go into her brain and figure out what's going on. And in it, we see the smiley face that we saw earlier in the show, where Lon keeps remembering this smiling person. Turns out that it's her brother. And there's a big long scene where, them on the planet and run away. And anyway, but he hands her a sketchbook that he's created, and she looks at it and she realizes that what he had written down was how to determine what the Gorn was saying because they communicated to each other with light. And it was almost like a Morse code kind of book that he figured out what each letter meant and decoded some of the messages and stuff like that, right? So she comes out of it and she realizes that, this is how the two Gorn ships are communicating with each other, right? So La'ana uses, I forget what it was, like signal lights or something. She sends a signal over to the larger ship to tell her that the smaller ship had been boarded by the enemy. And of course, the Gorn can't have any sign of weakness at all. So the big Gorn ship destroys the small Gorn ship, and so they're all happy about having. So now they've got one big giant ship to deal with, and they're the way they go. And so back on the cargo bay, they decide that this MacGuffin thingy that Uhura, and you remember Uhura and Hammer, right? They've finally figured out that they can't. Even though they solved the original problem with the MacGuffin, it's still going to blow up, and there's nothing they can do about it. So they decide that they'll have to get it off of the ship somehow. So they'll have to open the cargo. They'll have to empty the cargo bay out, and so by opening the big doors, which again, like one of those myths that they talk about. When you open the doors, everything goes blown out, kind of thing. Typical sci-fi, space travel trope. So they have to put on suits and get ready to do this thing. But they determine, this is another one of these playing with physics things, John. Strap in, here it goes. So they decide they need to head into the event horizon, which is the tipping point of a black hole, at which point you cannot get out of the gravitational pull of the black hole, right? So they're going to head that way, and they're going to use that to slingshot themselves. I mean, now, correct me if I'm wrong. If they slingshot themselves through a black hole, don't they go back in time and have to do a whole nother storyline? Anyway.
If you go by what I have learned from Andromeda, the other Roddenberry series.
Oh, Andromeda. Now we're going to bring another Roddenberry story.
They would actually be going kind of in the future because time would dilate for them so much that they would...
It stretches, yes, exactly. Yeah. But I was just using in was it Star Trek 4 and the last episode or last series of Picard, they basically used the sun to slingshot themselves back in time. Anyway, by the way, Brian Cox does say we have already figured out time travel. Just I'll let that sit there for a minute. Anyway, so yeah, and then of course more sciencey stuff. Pike talks about, well, what about this gravitational redshift? What's that about? And turns out that as you go across the event horizon, because light speed and where you are, because of the difference in time between gravitational pull and speed of light, for a second there, or for a short time, it looks like the ship has stopped moving, even though it's still continuing to move. And so they kind of that gives them the opportunity to kind of play dead. And of course, Pike says, well, what do snakes, skunks, and possums ducks? It says, not what it says here. I'm going to read what it says. I can't imagine what it says on my autocorrect. But snakes, ducks, and possums, what do they all have in common? They all play dead, right? To evade their enemies. So they decide to use the AP-350, which they have to get off the ship anyway as a decoy. They're going to let that, they're going to drop it out of the cargo bay and blow up, and then hopefully they'll think that the Enterprise is blown up, as in fact they're actually slingshotting away from the black hole. So Hammer and Uhura put on their suits, and they strap themselves to the ship with cables. And as they're doing this, it is an interesting part of the show, because as they're doing this, Hammer talks to her about how his race feels about death. He sort of says, like, in death, their life is about fulfilling their purpose, and once you fulfill your purpose, it's okay for you to die. And she says, well, what's your purpose? He says, my purpose is to fix broken things, right? And he asks her what her purpose is, and she says, well, of course, based on what she was doing last week, she really hasn't figured out a purpose. And I want to go back, because I didn't think about this at the time when Jaime and I were talking about last week's show, but I just want to take a minute. I can do it now, or I can do it afterwards. Let's do it now. I don't know if you remember, there was a scene where she's talking to Spock after the whole resolution of the issue last week, and Spock is talking to her about her role in Starfleet, and how she had said, I don't know why I'm in Starfleet. I kind of just followed my grandmother into the whole thing, and that's why I ended up here, and I'm not really sure if this is the right thing for me. And meanwhile, cadets are killing themselves to get into Starfleet, and here's this Uhura's basically just wandered in, and the whole crew kind of look at her kind of sideways, including Spock, considering that thousands and thousands of kids have tried to get into the position she's in, right? To be not just to get into Starfleet, but also to be a cadet on the Enterprise. And I thought there's an interesting parallel. I don't know if you guys ever know the story about Nichelle Nichols and Martin Luther King. So in the original series, like after the first couple of episodes, Nichelle Nichols, who of course was one of the first black women on television, also first black woman in a command position on an Enterprise, in being seen by millions of people, she wasn't sure that she wanted to be in Star Trek. She wasn't sure that this was the right role for her. And she was on the set, or she was at a hotel or something, and somebody said, "There's somebody who wants to meet you." And she says, "Oh, okay." Well, she went over and to meet this person, and the person who wanted to meet her was Martin Luther King. And he said to her, "I think what you're doing here is amazing. You are representing black people, you're representing women, you're representing, in a position like no one has ever seen a woman in a role that you're in on television in front of millions of viewers." And so that kind of inspired her to stay on the show, and sort of gave her her purpose in Starfleet, right? Which is kind of interesting because it's kind of the same sort of thing that the Sigourney Weaver character goes through on Galaxy Quest, where her role is to repeat what the computer says, right? Anyway, so I think that was an interesting story. You guys still there, by the way?
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with the story. It's definitely a nice part of the history of Star Trek, right? I mean, it's an important part of the civil rights movement too.
Well, and it's also an important point about representation. I mean, like when my daughter was little and Belle was was the star of Beauty and the Beast, she really identified with this dark-haired, young girl who was the heroine of the story, right? As opposed to, all the blonde princesses that you see in all the other shows, and the same thing with Quinn, with Moana, who's the little Hawaiian girl, right? So it's important to see, yourself in the people you see on TV, and I think people talk about that all the time. Like Asians talk about that with, Kim's Convenience and Shang-Chi, and even the dudes who go to White Castle, Harold and Kumar, right? Yep. Those kind of roles are important for people, right? Anyway, coming back to our story, so the AP-360 is dropped out of the cargo bay. Of course, all the air leaves their cargo bay, and of course, one of the straps breaks, and Gorn has to grab Uhura with his broken hand. I don't know. I don't get that. But anyway, so he managed to hang on to her, and but as it goes across this red shifty thing, it's a good name for it, red shifty thing, right? The Gorn sees the thing blow up, and they assume that was the Enterprise that blew up, and so the big giant Gorn ship takes off, and away they go. And Alana's still a little miffed about the whole experience of this encounter with the Gorn, and she's like, they're not going to stop, they're just going to keep coming, and Pike says to her, it'll be okay, like we'll be ready next time, like they won't catch us by surprise next time, because we'll be ready for that, right? Una, by the way, who's lying on her deathbed in sickbay, kind of wakes up and realizes she's not as bad off as she should be, and she looks down at her arm and she realizes that there's an Ivy running between her and Mbega. He's been giving her his blood in order to provide her the plasma that she needs, where she couldn't get the plasma, so he's given her direct transfusion kind of thing, right? And so at the end of it, Lana, who's back in her room, puts on the remembrance pin, and sort of the story comes full circle. And she realizes that in this conflict, seven crew members gave their lives, and they're put into the torpedoes that don't seem to exist anymore. I don't get that. But
those might have just been caskets, to be fair.
Yeah, that's true. I guess. Yeah, they must keep like a complement of them around. I don't know. But yeah, and she sort of says at the end of it, and again, she's closing out her log, and she sort of says, the last thing she says, we managed to have a battle with the Gorn, and we survived, and that's how the episode ends. Da-da-da.
Okay, I have a burning question. So, in the discussion of prequels, which will start and continue here and continue into our discussion about Obi-Wan.
I don't ever remember owning a droid. What are you talking about?
Yeah. So Memento Mori is Latin. It means remember you must die. So it's always bear in mind that your life is finite and that you must eventually die. And it ties into La'an, it ties into the Hammer and Uhura story. But for me, I just keep coming back to Pike as the central character of this show. So there's a small scene where they're like, he's like, hey, what if we went into the event horizon and what if we use that to escape? And they're like, was it Ortegas? Is just like, that's a terrible idea. And he's like, no, it's going to be fine.
For him.
So that's the thing. Does he make gambles based on his vision? Does he think, hey, I'm not going to die here because I see how I'm going to, or I'm not going to meet my fate here because I'm not going to, is he making assumptions based on the vision that he had? Like, is he like, this is going to be fine because I know I'm going to be okay in 10 years when I end up getting, smucked in the reactor exposure?
That's an interesting theory.
Yeah, I mean, if he was going to test it out, he would have been, on the torpedo that they dropped. He would have been on it.
Like Dr. Strangelove?
Like Dr. Strangelove, exactly.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you, like, again, if you knew that was where you would meet your fate, wouldn't you just be like, yeah, I'm not going to take the turbo lift. I'm going to jump down this elevator shaft and see what happens. Like, I don't know. It seems to me like when he said that in the moment, just the way he said it's going to be fine, it wasn't like the reassurance of a captain. It was more like, I've seen the future. I'm good. Like, maybe most of the ship is destroyed, but you're fine. Maybe half the crew dies. Like, maybe you're making, your mouth is kind of writing checks, your butt can't cash. Like, I don't know. It just, thinking of what the title means and then thinking about, this sort of recurring theme, even through the first 4 episodes of like Pike's mortality looming and the accident that's coming, it just made me laugh when he was just very like, it's good, I got this. He was just like, I know this is not how I and the Enterprise meet our fates because I've seen 10 years in the future. The Enterprise is still here. I'm still here. It's fine.
Interesting.
Again, I might be reading a lot into that. That one just sort of jumped out at me like a big red flag. I also really liked the conversation that Hemmer has with Uhura, where he talks about pacifism versus passivity. I thought was beautifully written. I will shout out whoever wrote that for the show, but just the idea that just because you are a pacifist doesn't mean that you need to be passive, I thought was very, very eloquently put.
Yeah, the whole idea of resistance or like, a pacifist doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to roll over and have people walk all over you kind of thing, right?
Yeah, it doesn't mean that you are somebody who is not going to support a cause. It just means you're not somebody who's willing to fight for the cause.
Right. Or kill for the cause.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought that was very, very deftly handled.
Yes, that was a good part. Yeah, some of the things he says are interesting, but yeah. He's an interesting character. He's sort of the Spock of this show, right?
Yeah, he's sort of somewhere between Spock and the priest, or what they call the nuns of what was it? Quatmalat. Yeah, the candor. Yeah, he just sort of says what's on his mind. It's kind of refreshing. Yeah. Although it's funny, I was thinking about that as having now gone through 4 episodes of this. It's interesting how interestingly casual everybody is. Like, they're all just throwing around each other's first names, and it does not feel...
Which unlike the original series, was a bit more, very much more formal, right?
Yeah, I mean, more sort of like a naval ship, right? As you'd expect, right? They were kind of treating it like it was the Space Navy. Whereas this is more like a science expedition. They're like, sure... Chris is in charge, but that's just like Chris, it's not like Mr. Captain Pike. It's just Chris, right? It's just funny when, he as you say, he mentions Ortegas' first name, and just some of the stuff where they're going back and forth where you're like, okay, this is kind of weirdly casual for a theoretically militaristic vessel. I mean, they are a science vessel, but you got a lot of explosives for a science vessel.
Well, and also the politically correctness, like the part where they, like, somebody actually La'anis actually says that a crew person has died.
I heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, back in the days, and I don't know if it's like this in the Navy now, but they would refer to I think they refer to in Undiscovered Country, don't they call one of the lady officers Mr. at some point?
Mr. Savick. Mr. Savick.
Yeah, Mr. Yeah, exactly. They used the term Mr. to speak to them, because that's what the title was. It wasn't meant to be like, the whole idea was you call them Mr. because they're not meant to have a gender in your mind, right? Although I guess person is a politically correct way of saying it. I mean, it's kind of funny how the PC sort of sensibilities have changed our language, right? Noticeably, like crewman would have been what I would have said, not meaning to say that it's a gender thing, right? Even though it is a gender specific title. Yeah,
I think it struck me because I was wondering about it when they redid the opening. Of course, they did the opening to reflect, that, but it's no one, not no man, right?
Yeah. So Jaime, in the history of the American national anthem that have they ever changed the words?
The national anthem?
Yeah. Oh, Jose, can you see? Like, are your baseball seats good?
I don't know the answer to that because it doesn't. If it does change, it doesn't change often. So
in my lifetime, the Canadian national anthem has changed at least twice.
Yep.
Right. And every time I hear it, I'm like, what? Yeah, it's interesting that I mean, I get, like, they've taken the God reference out of our. I think
no, we still say God. Unfortunately, still, even though it's an anthem for a country, we still add religious overtones to it.
But there's that I think it's the third.
It's all of us verse. Instead of all thy sons.
Yeah, it used to be all thy sons or all our sons or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
All of us command. Yeah.
Yeah. Now it's all of us command. So
like we all have control over the country. Give your head a shake.
Yeah. Well, we are a republic,
for which it stands under the Queen.
Well, yes, technically.
Yeah. Anyway, but I like where the show's going. Like I said, like the parallel between like they're definitely borrowing some sort of ideas. Like I think last week I didn't quite catch it when I watched it, but when I reflected on it during the week, and then I saw Uhura having her moment of I don't know why I'm here kind of thing. It reminded me of the Uhura or the Nichelle Nichols story, right?
Yeah.
And the because I watched the show, and then when I do the recap, I watch it again, and I kind of fast forward through just to get the salient points. But the conflict in the gas cloud, the brown dwarf gas cloud, of how they have to rethink how things work. Like they don't have sensors, they don't have weapons, they don't have a cloaking device because they haven't, Kirk hasn't stolen it from the Romulans yet. But of course, wait and see they break that one, right? But the kind of things that they do. Oh, and the part I didn't also talk about was coming out of the mind meld, because La'ana and Spock share consciousness. She realizes that he's recently lost Michael Burnham, because we actually hear Michael Burnham's voice in his thoughts, right? Or if you caught that at all.
Yep.
Yeah. So, but I like the way that they're kind of borrowing from those sort of naval battle kind of scenarios that they kind of covered in the original series. Which those episodes were much more like science fiction stories back in short stories that you would read back in the Pulp Fiction days. Where it wasn't it's kind of just how one commander takes on another commander, not knowing anything how that other commander is going to think and act and whatever, and strategizing about that. Because if you think about it, if you watch that show, it's kind of like Kirk could have let the Mark Leonard ship go, right? Like he could, but no, he decided he has to pursue them, and he outwits them, and he ends up destroying the ship, right? In the episode, and that's kind of like when you think about it, that's at what point do you just sort of say let them go, because are they going to come back and attack you again? Sort of thing. Like that's something that you would do in a 60s show, and you wouldn't necessarily do in a 90s or 2000 show, right?
Yeah. I'm again, they tried to tell more moralistic stories, I think.
Yeah.
Back in the day, where the evil are punished.
It was a simpler time. We didn't have the internets. We didn't have people watching television. Were it was very sort of Twilight Zone-y in that sense too. Twilight Zone was very similar to that kind of stuff, right? Moral position stories and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But what do you mean? He's white on one side and I'm white on the other side.
We're completely different. What could it mean?
Yeah, exactly. But you look the same to me.
What's a metaphor? All right, you ready to get into the Obi-Wan of it?
Yeah, let's talk about Obi-Wan Kenobi.
All right, I will try and power through because we've got the first 2 episodes of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series on Disney Plus dropped simultaneously and dropped early. It came out 9 p.m. Pacific time at midnight for the East Coasters, which was a pleasant surprise for some. Although personally, I had to go to bed and get up early, so I didn't watch it till today, anyways. But did awake to lots of people talking about it, which was kind of funny. So, episode starts with a flashback. Well, first it starts with a recap. If you felt so inclined, you could have a recap of the first 3 prequel movies.
Yeah, actually, that reminds me. I did want to talk about the recap before we get into this.
Okay.
Did you not notice that most of the recap was from the last 15 minutes of Revenge of the Sith?
Well, yeah.
What was the rest of that movie for?
The hold my beer moment of part of the whole trilogy. Yeah.
Well, I mean, and really that's the bulk of what you need to know, although there's certainly some stuff in there that they are showing to you because they're telegraphing some stuff that's going to happen. It's, by no coincidence are we seeing Liam Neeson, and there's some foreshadowing in the stuff that they deliberately put into that.
I was waiting for his voiceover to come in.
Yeah,
right?
it will. Stay tuned.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is he signed on? Do you know?
Nobody has confirmed it, but I would wager 1 kidney on that one. So
right. Well, maybe it's got a Majel Barrett's, computerized voice is going to do it.
It's quite possible. Although, again, Liam, can you, go and walk over to a recording studio?
Here's a bag of money. Record this on your cell phone.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll make it all sound all spooky and ethereal. So anyway, we get the little recap of the first 3 movies, mostly obviously focusing on the Obi-Wan moments, but also the fall of Anakin. I almost would have liked it and I know that never the twain shall meet, but I really would have liked it if they had put in a couple of moments from the Clone Wars cartoon.
Yeah.
I really felt like that was a moment for it where, we've talked about it on the show previously, but the Clone Wars cartoon does an excellent job of redeeming the original the prequel trilogy and making Anakin a really interesting character.
So it was interesting. I just before we started recording, I was floating around YouTube and I noticed that there was an interview from yesterday with Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen, and they had them in the middle of the pit with all the Star Wars fans around, and they spent most of the time just cheering at them, right? But they asked Hayden Christensen an interesting question. He said, what do you think about where coming back to do this role? And he says, it was really interesting to sit and watch because he studied Clone Wars and Rebels before coming back to reprise his role of breathing in a Bacta tank, right? But spoilers for today's show. But it was interesting that he talked about having gone, because I mean when he was playing Anakin Skywalker, even though we all knew, or everybody knew, that was going to transition to Darth Vader at some point, like you said, the Clone Wars specifically and a little bit of the Rebels cover and expound on his character much more, like you said, him having Ahsoka as his Padawan and being a general in the army and all that kind of stuff, and working missions and being a little headstrong in terms of like Obi-Wan's always trying to I can't control that guy, he just goes flying off and solves problems, and Anakin Skywalker's approach to conflicts was just to jump in and start whipping his lightsaber around and getting the clone guys to attack, which is something that you don't see happen in. He's very much a solo person and no pun intended, but he's a solo character in the prequel movies. But in Clone Wars, he's very much a general. He's very much a leader of men, right?
And really, it's the relationship that you see with him and Ahsoka, and even the relationship that he has with R2, and again, you really see more of the real relationship with him and Obi-Wan that isn't always antagonistic. That there is that brotherly uncle father or uncle nephew kind of love between them. And it's they did an excellent job of redeeming the character. And as I say, as I watched that preview, I thought, I get what they're giving you. They're giving you the greatest hits, and especially for the mainstream audience. But it really felt like that was an opportunity to tie in some of the beautiful work that they did there. And I get why they didn't do it, but I really felt like that would have been a perfect spot to say, hey, you know what? The Clone Wars mattered. The Clone Wars series is important, and
especially since you have the what do you call the bad guys in this one, the
Inquisitors,
Inquisitors, yeah, exactly. What I was asking last week when we were talking about or 2 weeks ago when we were talking about the trailers, the guy with the sort of saucer head, like him, like he was definitely in Rebels, because the Grand Inquisitor was there as well, but there was him and the female Inquisitor that went out, fought against Darth Maul and. Yep. And
so in the cartoon, right? we see the fifth brother and the second sister. Here we saw the fifth brother, and we saw also the third sister, and then later in the second episode we see the fourth sister.
But how many of them are there? Do we know?
I don't know what the grand total is. We've seen some of them in different. We saw some of them in Rebels. We've seen them in Fallen Order, Star Wars Fallen Order, the video game, and they've been in the comic books as well, and as well as the expanded into. But
that's how they're known as first brother, second brother.
Yeah, there's the Grand Inquisitor is always the Grand Inquisitor, and then there's the first, second, third, fourth, fifth. I think we've seen as high as, I want to say 6, but I may be mistaken. I'll circle that one for fact check for next week.
Sure. Okay.
Anyway, long story short, the episode starts with a flashback. We're back during Order 66. We're at the Jedi Temple. We see some younglings outside with Jedi Master showing them some moves. We see the door come open. We see the clone troopers come in a-blasting, and she's quickly trying to take the kids and rescue them by running through the middle of the building, which you guys were already outside. Like, I realize you're a long way up, but there's got to be a better way. There's just got to be a better way. Anyways, so she's trying to get them through. She's trying to keep them safe, this group of younglings. But in the end, she gets killed, and we are left to sort of wonder what becomes of these younglings, although we'll talk about those theories maybe later on. We then cut to 10 years in the future. We are on Tatooine, and we see a ship, a black ship, descending onto Tatooine. We see the Inquisitors, and they sort of 3 Inquisitors walk into a bar, and the Grand Inquisitor is, of course, there. We recognize him from his appearance in Rebels. We see the 5th brother, and we see the 3rd sister, who is also named Riva, and they walk in, and they start sort of putting the pressure on. It's a little bit like the opening scene for Inglourious Bastards, where just talking is scaring the heck out of everybody. And so the Grand Inquisitor starts talking about, this is how you hunt down a Jedi. The Jedi, it's in their nature that they're going to try and help people. Their cause, their vows are like a plague to them. They just can't, it's like an itch they have to scratch. And if you wait long enough, they'll show up. And of course, you see the lightsaber marks on the wall. And, he sort of hypothesizes what happened. This Jedi couldn't stand seeing these people bullied and had to stand up for them. And of course, word travels through the galaxy, and that's why they're there. And sure enough, Riva throws a throwing dagger at the face of the proprietor of the bar, and it's stopped by the Force. And then they look over, and of course, they see that it's this younger man, and he's clearly either a former Jedi or a former Padawan, and he manages to somehow elude the 3 Inquisitors, which we may have to circle back on also. But he takes off. We then cut to a crashed, I think it's a Purgle, which if you guys have watched some of or all of Rebels, you will recognize Purgles. They're these giant flying space whales, for lack of a better term. It looks like a Purgle has crash landed on Tatooine, and they're treating it essentially like a mine. They are just basically slicing off pieces of this Purgle every day. And, so we see that Obi-Wan has left his life as a Jedi behind him. He's just a humble butcher. He lives in a cave. He goes every day and he works at this butchery where they pay them poorly and they treat them badly. He's living this
in Anchorhead too, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't know if you got that.
Yep, in Anchorhead, and he he's got this.
Isn't that where Luke was going to go to Anchorhead and get?
I was going to go to Tashi Station and get some power converters. So we see that, he's just got this kind of crap life. He goes back to his cave. We get our first little clue there that there's this not droid that he doesn't own that tells him whether or not people have been in his space during the day. This Jawa comes by and he purchases a toy from him, which looks like a Skyhopper, which is, of course, we see Luke playing with that same Skyhopper in the original Star Wars A New Hope. So there's a nice little tie-in there. He goes and we see him, after one of his normal days, he goes and he checks in on the Lars family farm where Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru live and are raising Luke, who is now 10 years old. And he is, watching him, pretend to be a pilot. He's, jumped on top of their sand igloo and is pretending to ride it like a pod, like his father would have. And, and then we see him leave the toy behind. He leaves it just outside the farm for Luke to have. We see Obi-Wan on his way back to his humble cave, and he notices that somebody's watching him. The same Jedi that we meet at the beginning of the episode steps out and says, I thought it was you, Master. I've been looking for you everywhere. My name's Nari. Hey, what are we going to do now? Want to join me? Let's go overthrow the Empire. And Obi-Wan's like, no, I'm not that guy. My name's Ben. I'm just some guy. And Nari's like, no. Like, what happened to you, man? You were like General Kenobi. You were like the big guy in the Republic. Like, what happened? And he's like, nope, I'm just some guy now. Go away. And he's, he alludes to the fact, like, you will bring heat if you're here. Luke can't be found. Bugger off. And so, of course, Nari seems pretty disappointed. And he makes a point there by saying, like, the best thing you can do is take this. And he points to his lightsaber and says, bury it in the desert and forget about it and go live a simple life somewhere. Again, we get this real vibe of, like, Kenobi's broken at this point. Like, he is just lost for having, seen everybody he knows is dead. All he has left is Luke. As far as he knows, like, Anakin died on Mustafar, Padme died, the Republic fell, Yoda's gone, the Jedi Temple's gone, all the Jedi have been killed. He's like, this is as low as this person can feel. And all he kind of has is watching over Luke. So then we cut to Alderaan, which is, of course, very different than Tatooine. And, we get a nice little look at, young 10-year-old Leia Organa, and she's this, silly little girl playing tricks on her mom, dressing up one of her handmaidens and running off into the woods and playing with her little droid, little cute droid, which coincidentally they showed you could buy for just the low price of X dollars at Star Wars Celebration today. Lola, her little droid. And her mom goes and finds her mom, Breha. We've never seen her mom before, so that was kind of a nice moment, right? Like we knew obviously Bail from the prequels, and it was nice to sort of finally get to see, the queen, I guess. And and then we get a little sort of foreshadowing there where we realize that someone has sort of been keeping an eye on her and her willingness to sort of disobey and go and run off into the woods. But yeah, we get this real juxtaposition of like this sad, desolate life that Obi-Wan's living with this, Leia doesn't love her life. She's frustrated by having to be the proper princess, but on this beautiful sort of, green, lush, luxury condos as far as the eye can see planet. So yeah, a pretty big difference. I don't know if I'm Luke later on, if I'm talking to Spirit Obi-Wan, I might be complaining just a bit. Like, why couldn't I have gone and lived with the Organa family. Maybe they wanted a kid who was a boy and not a girl. Maybe she can go live in the desert with my grumpy uncle who maybe drink blue milk. So from there we go back to Tatooine, and after another mundane day, Obi-Wan is going back to get his pet, not camel, whatever those things are called, and a bag falls at his feet, and a broken model of the Skyhopper falls out, and it's Owen, and he is ticked off and basically says, like, no, you, like, listen, you go away, like, just go away, don't come around, don't watch him. And Obi-Wan says, hey, we talked about this. Like, when he's old enough, Luke has to be trained. And of course, Owen slam dunks on him by saying, oh, you mean like you trained his father? Which is pretty vicious. For a guy who seems overall pretty humble, that's a pretty nasty burn.
Yeah, it is an odd characterization for Ben. I mean, like, for Owen, he's a bit grumpy in A New Hope, right? But then he's just got this teenage kid he's trying to corral, right? But I kind of at the end of the Sith movie, Obi-Wan kind of brings the baby to them and sort of says, "Hey, can you guys look after this kid, and I'll be around to keep an eye on him." But I can't imagine why he would turn so grumpy, right?
Yeah, although it occurred to me as I was watching this, and I was watching that sort of life that the Larses have out there on Tatooine, which is of course on the butt end of the galaxy where nobody else wants to be. He lives out even beyond the civilized parts of that, way out in the middle of nowhere with his wife and his airhead nephew. And I gotta think, yeah, I get why Owen was kind of ticked off by the end of his life. Like, that's a terrible life.
Yeah.
But anyway, we continue from there where, Owen is sort of, tells Obi-Wan off. Obi-Wan feels, chagrined and frustrated. And then, of course, the Inquisitors show up again. And, we get this scene where the Inquisitors show up and sort of say, hey, if you guys don't tell us where this Jedi is hiding, we're going to start chopping off people's hands. And the one woman says, you don't have any authority here. We're way out in the Outer Rim. The Empire doesn't have any sway over here. And of course, they cut off her hand. She's a hands-free device.
Reva does, yeah.
And yeah, so the next, of course, move is that Reva goes after Owen and says, what's your name? And are you housing a Jedi? And of course he is, not that he knows it, but, and, she basically says, if you guys don't turn over this Jedi right now, I'm going to kill this guy. I'm going to go to his house and kill his family. But again, we'll circle back to this. It's the prequel problem. You can't make threats against people who we know are going to live. It doesn't matter.
Right, yeah.
So
but eventually they do go kill his family.
Well, it's true. I mean, they do make good on that one, although, albeit another...
It's a few years
10,
now,
12
definitely.
years later, yeah.
Yeah.
So in the end, they basically are, they relent, they leave, the Inquisitors leave, and they take off. Obi-Wan comes over and sort of says, thanks for doing it for, thanks for not turning me in. And Owen says, well, it wasn't for you, dude. I wasn't protecting you, it was protecting the kid, right? And we cut back to Alderaan, and we get a nice scene where, Leia is now, capitulated. She's wearing her pretty princess outfits, and she's being sort of shown off. We go to, a scene where they greet some of their family on this landing pad, and then they're waving to the loving crowd who obviously, Bail and his family are very popular, and the young princess. And they end up at this sort of cocktail party where we actually see C-3PO in the background, reprogrammed C-3PO.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, YO, she said.
No, there's two of them.
Oh,
if
really?
you have the subtitles on, we actually hear C-3PO as well.
Really?
Only on for about 3-4 seconds in the background, but I guess we know what his job before he ended up on that freighter was he was working as a server in a cocktail bar.
Well, he does end up on the princess's barge in the beginning, or ship on the beginning of New Hope.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I guess that's his next job. But in the meantime, he's busy working the crowd at cocktail party. We get Leia interacting with her cousin, who is not named, but I've named Cousin Douchey, who is just being like a really rotten kid to her. You're adopted and nobody likes you, and you don't even look like us, and just being a real schmuck. And of course, Leia is a very, very bright young woman, and she just tears him a new one, and basically reduces him to tears. She ends up getting a talking to from her mom and dad, or her mom particularly, who is just like, hey, you can't talk like that to your cousin. You need to apologize. She's like, And then her dad gives her a talking to, and clearly he's the one who she most sort of, relates to. And she says, fine, I'll apologize. But she doesn't. She goes and she runs away again. And so we see a sort of duplicate scene to the first scene where she runs off into the woods. But this time, the person who was watching her the first time, who turns out to be a guy named Vect, is waiting for her along with a couple of goons. And we get a little chase scene before she is caught. Vect, of course, played by Red Hot Chili Peppers bassist Flea, because hey, why not?
Yeah, he's been in a few movies actually. Flea.
Well, he was Back to the Future, right? He was in Back to the Future,
right? Yeah.
But so we get this scene where she's captured, and then of course we go back to Obi-Wan's humble life, and something happens that sort of breaks up his usual routine. There's a weird noise coming from inside one of his containers. He opens it up, and of course it's a hollow communicator, and it's Leia's parents, and
which is kind of loud for a guy who's hiding in a cave.
I
really
had the same thought. I'm like, put that thing on silent, put it on vibrate, man. Like, what? Come on. Or hey, why didn't you bury that in the desert next to the lightsaber? Anyways, so we end up with
it's the Netflix device of the future, I guess.
Yeah, no kidding. We end up with the parents being on there saying, "Help us, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're our only hope." It's been 10 years, but we really need you to, come and do this. I could not help. My mind immediately went to Yoda's line, excitement, adventure, or a Jedi craves not these things, unless, of course, they've been just cutting up stinky space fish for the last 10 years, in which case a little action wouldn't be too bad. He originally turns them down and says, listen, I'm not your guy. I'm not going to go do this. But Bale shows up in person and basically says, listen, old friend, pretty please, with sugar on top. You got to save this kid. If they find out who she really is, we're in deep doo-doo. And, you got to do this for me. And so Obi-Wan basically, you get the vibe that he's going to say yes. Of course, it would be a very crappy show if he didn't.
Can I ask a question? So I understand, having not really thought about it till today, but having seen that, Owen is actually related to Luke. I guess he's a Skywalker or whatever.
Well, no, technically not, right? Because he was...
Oh, he's a stepbrother of Anakin, right?
That's right. His dad married Anakin's mom, so they'd be stepbrothers.
Right. So he's a step uncle of Luke.
No blood, but family.
But exactly. But other than Organa being a king or whatever of
it's weird because he seemed like he's a senator and she's a princess. It's the same thing as on Naboo, right? It seems like a weird distinction.
But how is he related to Padme somehow, or he just decided to be a nice guy? And
no.
They were looking for a kid. They are not related.
No, he's simply the adopted father for Leia. He and Padme, especially you've watched the Clone Wars, they are friends. Yeah. They are very close.
Oh, okay.
But they are not blood related. No.
Yeah, the prequel trilogy part was, what do we do with these twins? With Leia, he's like, well, I'll take the girl because my wife and I were already talking about, having a daughter. So it's kind of like the Ma and Pa Kent found this space child from Krypton. And he's like, all right, well, let's pretend it's ours. And this plays into this series where Leia gets, teased from her step cousin that, like, you're not a real Organa, right? So it's known that she's adopted, at least within the family. They don't know where the source, but they know that she, at least even the boy there knows that she's not a, quote, real Organa.
So there's also another prequel problem, because I don't know if I talked to you about it previously, but on Rebels when Leia shows up, right? Yeah, I did talk to you about that, because there's, in Ahsoka, she's a young toddler.
Yeah, but by the time we get so Rebels happens about 12 years after this. So she is in her early 20s.
Yeah, okay. And then But she was 19 when Carrie Fisher was 19 when New Hope was filmed. But not that matters. But and so now we have her here as a 10-year-old. I mean, like, do you think that's like? Don't you find they're going to end up with but hey, I don't remember ever owning a droid problem?
I don't think it's that glaring. I think time-wise, they've actually been pretty decent around her. I think the more glaring problem is when you look at Obi-Wan now versus Obi-Wan 12 years from now, when it's like 70-year-old Alec Guinness. So I don't know what's going to happen in these 6 episodes, but boy, is it rough on Obi-Wan. Because he goes from like, sort of red bearded, swarthy looking 50s to like very craggy looking white haired 70s by the time we flash forward 12
Was he
years.
70 really? Like, I'm just going to check this out.
Yeah, I don't know how old he was at that point, but I mean, Alec Guinness was not a young man when he filmed that stuff, right? So anyway, so to keep the ball rolling here, anyways, we go back to the ship that has filled with the mercenaries that have kidnapped Leia. She's on this thing, and she is on her way to Dayu, and she thinks she might have a way out of there. She pulls Lola out of her pocket. Lola happens to have a rotating knife attached to it, because why wouldn't you have one of those for a small child? And starts trying to cut through her ropes. And of course, the Vect comes in and throws Lola to the ground, smashing her and deactivating her. We then cut back to the desert, where we see Obi-Wan take his friend, the Not Camel, out into the middle of nowhere. How he remembered exactly where he left this thing, I would like to know.
He's amazing.
And so that's a good memory, to like be in the middle of the Dune Sea being like, that's the spot. Maybe again.
Well, but he knows where his Kyber.
Kyber
his
crystals
Kyber
bond
crystal,
with their Jedi, so maybe he can sense it, but he ends up basically digging a hole, and it's not even a deep hole. It's probably like 2 feet deep, not even. And he digs out a box, and inside the box is not one but 2 lightsabers, his and of course Anakin's. And then we go back to the ship, and we realize that the mercenaries are working for Reva, the third sister, and that this is all part of her plan to lure Obi-Wan Kenobi out of hiding, because she realizes that Bail and Obi-Wan were friends, and that maybe by putting Bail's daughter at risk, that this will be the thing that draws her out. So she's not actually kidnapping Leia because she suspects anything about Leia or her origin. She's doing it to draw out Obi-Wan. And we wrap up the first episode with Obi-Wan making the decision to actually hop on board a space freighter and head towards Dayu. And and then that's the end of episode 1.
So some real-time follow-up here. Alec Guinness was 63 in 1977. So if they filmed it in 76, then he would have been 62.
And how old is Ewan McGregor now? He's got to be in his early 50s.
51 years old. Yeah.
So again, the math actually works out. But boy, it really does say something about where we are when somebody who's 60 looks like, or somebody who's in their 50s looks like Ewan McGregor now, versus somebody who's like in their early 60s looking like Alec Guinness did then, because he looked like an old man.
But that's also part of the sort of British culture.
For somebody who is also in their early 60s, Tim, I think you look a lot better for your age than Alec Guinness did in 1977.
Well, okay, fine.
Now, admittedly, you haven't been living in a mud hut in the middle of the desert for 20 years, but yeah.
Jason Jawa.
There you go. And practicing your crate dragon calls to scare off the sand people, right?
Yeah.
All right. So then we for of course the nice bonus was that we get 2 episodes to start. So episode 2 kicks in, and of course we are on Dayu.
So before we get into that, so my questions about episode 1 is why didn't Bail Organa give Obi-Wan some sort of transport device? Like, isn't he like a rich giant?
I believe he gives him the money to transport, because.
Oh, okay. Because all of a sudden he's got all those credits, right? Yeah. Okay.
I think he's paid. I think he was
basically poor, right? He was poor before that, right? Living the life of a hermit, as it were.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Carry on.
So he arrives on Daiyu, and he's got this tracking device, which again must have been provided by Bale. And he realizes on the planet, hey, it's not working anymore. And a handy person at the disembarkation station there basically says, yeah, that's not going to work here. They block all the signals, so you're going to have to figure it out from there. Daiyu looks kind of like LA from Blade Runner, a little bit.
Right.
A little bit like Tokyo at night. And, we get a nice little cameo there. We get to see a clone trooper, begging for spare change. Sad, kind of, funny little cameo, especially given who he was in the Grand Republic Army. We get the spice dealer. He's trying to sort of find hey, where can I start looking for Leia, and runs into a spice dealer. The spice dealer basically says, good luck, and hands him a container of spice and says, here, this'll perk up your day. And of course that comes into play a little later. A little boy runs up to him and says, hey, if you're looking for help, I can direct you for the right price to the local Jedi. And intrigued, Obi-Wan's like, yeah, all right, let's go see the local Jedi. And of course we get a very funny scene where Kumail Nanjiani is playing Haja Estri, and he is doing a mummer's farce of what it's like to be a Jedi, where he's controlling bringing the lightsaber to his hand and closing the windows with his mind, and basically pretending to do this Jedi bit for the benefit of this mother and child who want to get off planet because he seems to be force sensitive, and of course then we get Obi-Wan coming in there and basically confronting him and being like, cool, good to see you there, buddy, nice job with the magnets and the pre-programmed stuff. And he's like, well, yeah, I took their money, but I'm not setting them up. They're actually going to go free. It's just, this is all like theater, right? And in the end, he basically says, hey, let's, I think I can help you. He ends up basically sending him off to, check out this spot. The spot is a spice lab. So Obi-Wan goes in and tries to, blend in. He puts on a mask. He goes into this spice lab where they're working on stuff. And he goes in and he sort of works his way in. He beats up a couple guards. He sneaks in. He goes into the prison where he thinks that Leia's being held. And of course, that's when the trap is sprung. They wanted him to come there. Leia's not where he thought she was. And they're going to have him imprisoned. But of course, he's got that pocket full of spice. And so he puts the mask on and he smashes the spice on the ground. And then the three mercenaries all end up high out of their minds. And, they had already called the third sister and said, hey, come on down. We've got him. She shows up and is like, hey, you three high idiots, where the hell is my prize? And of course, in the meantime, he's located Leia, who is a little suspicious. Aren't you a little short for a Jedi? And again, interesting parallel there with him breaking her out of a cell. And anyway, of course, at this point, we see more Inquisitors arriving on the scene. And it's the Grand Inquisitor. Again, we see the fourth brother, and then we also see the fourth sister, who we didn't see in the first episode. So that was kind of cool. And they basically are saying, like, we got it from here. Nice of you to try and set this up and go around, behind our backs. But, if anyone's going to catch Kenobi, it's going to be the Grand Inquisitor. And, the third sister's like, oh, yeah, well, check this out. And she does the scene from John Wick 2. Like, it was almost exactly the same as John Wick 2, where, they call in the bounty on John Wick, yep. And all of a sudden all the devices go off and everybody's looking for John Wick. It was exact same scene, but with Kenobi. So it's John Kenobi, and all the hoodlums, bounty hunters, and slime balls on this planet are now looking out for him and for her. And so he's trying to sort of sneak around. He buys her a new outfit. They're trying to figure their way out of this stuff. There's a robot in the scene that looks an awful lot like Forlom, is one of the key bounty hunters on the bridge of the Star Destroyer. but it gets shot full of holes in a few minutes. So it's either not Forlom, it's a different robot, or it's Forlom, but somebody repairs it later on. They do not make it clear in the captions. I checked. So Leia is working with him, and then of course she starts to become suspicious because she realizes that he's being hunted, and why is he being hunted? What is this is actually, they're after you, they're not after me. You're trouble. I don't want to be around you.
But she's 10 and she can figure that out. Yeah,
she basically says I'm out of here, and so she bolts, and she's trying to take off. The third sister is standing on a rooftop, and she, of course, sees this laser fight going on where one of the bounty hunters is targeting Obi-Wan and trying to catch him and Leia. And she starts doing force parkour, which is pretty awesome, where she's not only is she jumping and cat jumping and leaping off walls and stuff like that, but she's knocking stuff down with the force to make herself pathways. It is pretty neat. I gotta admit, it's pretty neat. Does a little force parkour, and then, of course, Leia's trying to get away from Obi-Wan, and she ends up trying to take a jump where she can't quite clear it. She's about to fall to her death, and he, for the first time, clearly in quite a long time, reaches out with the Force and catches her and lowers her very gently to the ground, at which point she realizes, hey, maybe you're not a bad guy after all. You did not just let me get splattered all over the streets of this planet. They come to the next part where it looks like Haja and his little boy assistant are going to be in it for the money, and he actually shows up and is actually helpful. He gives them advice on hey, you need to go to this cargo port. They won't be monitoring it. It's not for people. You can get out that way. And he's like, why are you helping me? And he's like, I'm not a bad guy. I'm just, I like money. It is all it is to it. And meanwhile, the Grand Inquisitor and the Inquisitors are trying to figure out from Vect, hey, where is Kenobi? What's going on? We get to see one of the rotating lightsabers like we've seen in, of course, Rebels, but most people haven't seen until now in live action. We get to see the rotating lightsaber turn Vect or flees Vect into a sprayed mess all over the ground. So goodbye to Vect. We then get Reva, while she's looking for Obi-Wan, runs into Haja. Haja puts on his I'm a Jedi routine. She's like, no, you're not. And she throws him against the wall using the Force. He delivers the great line, those didn't feel like magnets. And she reaches into his mind and sort of pulls out where he has sent Obi-Wan and Leia. We get a nice little moment when Leia and Obi-Wan are trying to, get ready to go onto the transports, where, she's a very, well-spoken, clever, intuitive, commanding little child. And he says, you remind me, Leia, you remind me of somebody. You remind me of a very strong leader that I once knew. Of course, having been very close friends with Padme. At that point, we get Reva showing up. Reva's chasing them. He basically gives the key to the cargo ship to Leia, says, get on it. If you don't see me jumping on board, get the hell out of here. It looks like it's going to be a showdown between Reva and Kenobi. He's got his lightsaber in hand, and you're sort of waiting for the lightsaber fight to break out. But the Grand Inquisitor shows up and sort of says, no, you're not doing this. You're not taking my collar. I'm the Grand Inquisitor. I'm doing this. And she says, yeah, I hear you, right at you. And she runs him through with a lightsaber and leaves him for dead. Now we get a lingering scene where we see him lying on the ground, not breathing. But we do know that the Grand Inquisitor is still alive in the time of Rebels, and we do know that we thought Fennec Shand was dead when she was shot through too. Now, admittedly, a lightsaber stab through the abdomen's pretty damaging, but clearly not to his race because he's alive in the future. So that's a bit of a weird, misleading one. So again, if people aren't familiar with Rebels, it could be pretty ambiguous. I think for those of us who've watched it, we know he's alive. And in Rebels, there's no incongruities because he's only ever seen wearing full body armor. So we never see his abdomen. So we don't know if he's got like a robotic part or a scar or whatever, right?
Well, Fennec Shan gets rebuilt, right?
Well, that's it. And so even though he appears to be dead in this moment, that's not to say that he is actually, and that he couldn't be backdud or roboticized or something in here. But it does, obviously, it makes it clear to us with Reva that this is very personal and that she's not going to take a backseat. She wants Kenobi, and it's more than I want fortune and glory. She does make a reference in the previous episode that I didn't mention about, basically, I want my revenge, more or less. Sorry, just before that, she did drop the truth bomb on Obi-Wan, which is the one that sort of sends him reeling before he's able to escape. She says, Lord Vader can't wait to meet you. He's been searching all over for you. By the way, you didn't know, Anakin Skywalker is alive. He is Darth Vader. And, we end the episode with a very, very upset and scared looking Obi-Wan flying away on the cargo shuttle with Leia, with the knowledge that Vader is alive. And then we, of course, cut to Hayden Christensen as Vader in the Bacta tank with the mask on, and of course the famous sound of his breathing. So yeah, really fast paced and momentum forward first two episodes. What'd you guys think?
Lots of Easter eggs, so the whole sort of market and exactly.
Yeah.
Characters and bits and pieces, yeah.
Jaime, give me some love. What'd you think?
I don't want to say negative stuff about it. I thought it was nice. I don't know that
say negative things. Come on, Jaime, you're too positive. Get in there.
I don't really have like solidly negative stuff. So it's going to sound like I'm saying bad things, but I just don't know that I was as compelled by it as I was with like The Mandalorian, right? Mandalorian got me sort of right from the beginning. I feel like I sort of had to invest in Book of Boba Fett to get there. So I'm not going to discount Obi-Wan here from the first two episodes. I think, nice content. I don't know that it's one that I will, shout from the rooftops for people to go watch, like I would with The Mandalorian. So positive, to be really clear, positive thoughts about it, but it wasn't something where I felt like, oh man, that was so incredible. Got to go post on Facebook, check it out.
So what do you think it was about those first two episodes that didn't quite grab you? I mean, obviously you're familiar with, the lead character much more so than The Mandalorian. You have a history with Obi-Wan, and, there's certainly, a lot of, as you say, tie-ins, Easter eggs throughout connecting the whole series. What about this didn't quite grab you? Was it where Obi-Wan was? Was it sort of how this particular two episodes arc played out? What didn't quite grab you?
I don't know. I'll have to think about that, since I sort of just binged the two that came out pretty much immediately when they came out. I think the Inquisitor stuff is cool. I think the starting off with Order 66 and setting that as the case for things. I think the recurring theme of Obi-Wan is, got this terrible job so he can survive sort of thing, is neat. I don't know. I don't know why it didn't just click with me for some reason. I'll have to chew on that a little bit.
Yeah. Did it feel a little bit to you like this whole two parts was really just a build up to where we end the last episode, which is really where we wanted it to go?
I wonder if it's that. I wonder if it is really just a 2-hour long premiere, and then from here we'll get the real show. Maybe
more than anything, what I wanted to see out of this series wasn't, little Leia's adorable, and the young woman who played her was quite good, I thought. And there was lots of little sort of Easter eggs and tidbits and stuff, but all I really wanted out of this series was more Obi-Wan and Vader.
Yeah. I'm not so much looking forward to the Vader thing because as I said before, Vader in A New Hope is probably the most menacing of any of the movies he's been in. Right?
Except for the last 2 minutes of Rogue One.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
walks down the hallway and kills everybody.
Yeah, I know, but I don't mean that. I mean, that was like, after seeing Yoda with a lightsaber, like anything's possible, right? So
okay, but that was almost absurd.
Or Count Dooku, right? Like Count Dooku was another one too, right? But the Like, I mean, just like, it's not so much what Darth Vader does in A New Hope, it's what he doesn't do in A New Hope that makes him so scary. When he walks through the door on the first ship, right? And everybody just like pins himself against the wall, and then he lifts that one guy up, as if he's like weighs nothing as he's interrogating them, and this sort of how he is in the boardroom where the one guy's questioning his archaic faith and all that kind of stuff, and then how he's approaching Leia. Like it's very subtle. Like the performance is very, very subdued, right? It doesn't need to be. He's just this big black MF, you don't know. You've never seen a character like that before in sort of like a Black Knight with a cape kind of thing, right? Dark Knight. I mean, like a evil knight, right? And so that was kind of like, for me, that was like seeing that the first time, and Obi-Wan was respectable, as Alec Guinness, right? As his portrayal as the sage old, wizened, person who's explaining to Luke, about this archaic history of whatever, right? Like that's one of the things I like about A New Hope is it's very subtle in terms of how it tells the stories. And so some of the things that they did in this story were very similar to that, in that, we all know who Obi-Wan Kenobi is. We kind of have the backstory from the first three movies, right? We know his ability to go off and do missions. We know from watching Clone Wars that both he and Anakin were, kick-ass generals, and that he was always sort of the logical thinker, whereas Anakin was sort of the more emotive kind of run in, pull out the lightsaber and start slashing and ask questions later kind of thing, whereas Kenobi was more of a strategic general thinker kind of guy, right? More ethical, I guess, right? And so to see him in this, I don't really know that he was he looked defeated to me. He looked like he was playing, sort of the hermit role, very almost like Viggo Mortensen in what's that movie, the Cronenberg movie, where he's
History of Violence.
Yeah, where he's like just a regular guy, right? Just going to work in my SUV and
washing dishes, making food. Yeah.
Exactly. So that same sort, just slicing meat. I thought he was going to get crap from his supervisor for sticking the meat in his apron at the end of the day, kind of thing. Defeat his.
I have a feeling that
right?
will pay off at the end of this story. I suspect that to be the case.
There has a reason for that, yeah.
I think because he does it multiple times, and we get that that's part of his routine, but he keeps cutting bigger and bigger pieces.
Oh, does he?
Over the course of the first three times we see him do it, he keeps cutting bigger and bigger pieces, because I think subconsciously he's trying to get into conflict because he wants to stand up for these people.
Oh yeah, because at the point there where the guy complains about the amount of pay, like they only got half the pay that they normally get, and I got a family to feed, and even the Jawa says that to him, right? I've got a tribe to feed, right?
Yep.
The Jawa is great. I love that part, that exchange where he's like, here's the thing I found, and then he hears a sound and he goes, oh, you got a trouble with your evaporator, and
he's like, you're gonna steal from me.
Yeah, and he says, well, here, I just happen to have the part you need. And he goes, look, if you're going to steal my stuff, why can you at least clean it? Cleaning costs extra.
Yeah.
I love that sort of exchange. Like, I can do that for you, but, you got to pay me for it, right? So I'll steal it, but I'll give it back to you dirty, right?
Yeah.
So that was a funny bit. The Jawas can be a little annoying sometimes in Star Wars, but that was a good exchange. I like that little character there.
Yeah.
And he might come back at some point in the future too, right? Well, no, he gets the little ship from him, right?
Again, mm-hmm. That's about carrying thing from point A to point B, but yeah.
Yeah, I found it okay. It's kind of weird. Some of the like he's working in Anchorhead, and he's got to ride this mule for like hours to commute home, I guess, sort of thing, and live in his cave. And does he go back to work every day, kind of thing, or does he go once a week, or is this a job where you can just show up and get a day's pay, like being like a day worker at a construction site or something like that? There are jobs out there like that where you don't have to have a resume, you just show up and be a laborer, right, kind of thing. Right?
Yeah.
So and you know, the whole quarter portion thing that we saw in the Force Awakens kind of thing, where, you know, the under, it's a bit like I'm just thinking of a meme I saw on Reddit today, but the you know, like the scene with Rey, you know, she's a scavenger, and she's you know, goes and eats her bowl of gruel. He almost, I think when he adds the water to his thing and it kind of puffs up a little bit, it was a bit like that scene in Force Awakens as well. But the meme I saw on Reddit today was Obi-Wan coming out of the cave to eat his soup, kind of thing. And the caption was, Jesus comes out of his cave to eat his soup. So, I mean, I enjoyed it. I did enjoy I like the sort of Blade Runner-y kind of world that they go to in the second episode, you know?
Yeah.
And that Reva, she's got a real bone to pick. Like, you know, like she's a good character. I hate her already. Like, you know, I mean, like, I almost hate her right from the get-go. You know, she's just nasty to people, and she's even nasty to the other Inquisitors. Like, she's not towing the line, right? Like,
yeah,
it seems like the Empire has a sort of real sort of, this is the bureaucratic process, this is how the Empire runs, kind of thing, and she's a bit mavericky in that sense, right? So
yeah, I think it'll be interesting. So obviously the thing we haven't circled back on is the opening scene, which is the younglings, right? So the younglings, obviously the setup there is, you know, what happens to these younglings? What's the story there? And so I expect what we're going to find out is that she and perhaps some of the other Inquisitors
might have been younglings.
Were those younglings, and that they weren't saved by Obi-Wan, and somehow Obi-Wan, in her perception, did them wrong, and that she blames her lot on the fact that Obi-Wan.
Well, it's interesting I was thinking about that too. That you know, here we have, like, the Sith in general. You know, they have Jedi powers, but how come, you know, they're not hunted like Jedis are, right? And the comment that he makes about the fact that these are potential Jedis who turn to the Sith side. I mean, like, what else are you going to do if you have Jedi powers, right?
Well, it's die or turn or die, right? That's.
You either gotta become a Sith or Inquisitor or whatever, and of course, I'm sure to become an Inquisitor you have to be the best of the best, right? So there's probably like a whole culling process to become an Inquisitor as well, right? Yeah, and it sounds like they have a limited number of employment opportunities.
Well,
right?
they're corrupted by, you know, Vader and the Emperor to say, basically, your choices are work for us or die. They're not Sith, they're dark force, and there is a distinction because there can be only two Sith. They are dark force users, hence the cracked crystals, the red lightsabers, and the or the corrupted crystals, and the you know, the black and everything else. But, you know, all of them are basically the idea there is that they're like like Anakin, in that they were weak and they were broken, and the breaking of them leads them down this dark path, and once they're down the dark path, there's no going back, right? So I think it'll be interesting. Like you said already, after 2 episodes you hate Reva. I wonder if there's any kind of redemption for her, if she's going to be the monster. I mean, we already saw her turn on the Grand Inquisitor. You know, it's clearly there's something personal at play here. Again, I think it ties into that whole youngling story, but it'll be interesting to see if her character is irredeemable, or if she's, you know, if there's cause for her grievance.
Well, they've only got 4 more episodes for that arc, right?
Yeah, it is an interesting choice. I think it's a good choice to sort of start with these 2 episodes now here at the end of May. You know, this whole thing's going to be wrapped up in 4 weeks. It'll be done before summer is, which is certainly pleasant. I mean, it'll actually be done, I think, a week or 2 before The Strange New Worlds is. So, yeah, it's funny. The Strange New Worlds is 10 episodes, I think, right?
So what did you think overall? Like, are you on the positive side of this series, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky. It's the same thing, you know, it's funny. I remember watching The Phantom Menace with you when it first came out, and we were talking about it afterwards. And I said, you know what the best part of this movie was? And there were certainly problems with it, but overall I felt, you know, decently positive about it. I have certainly picked some nits out of it since then. But I said, you know what the best part of it was getting to see Jedis do Jedi stuff.
Yeah.
Because what we got in the original trilogy was a broken down Obi-Wan in a really lame sword fight with Darth Vader in the first one, a young Luke having a very clearly inexperienced versus experienced sword fight in the second one that was, it was a good fight scene, all things being equal, but it wasn't really like as athletic, I think, as we could have seen from the Jedi. And then we saw even the third one, like, Luke was conflicted. He didn't want to hurt his father. It was not a great sword fight in the grand scheme of things. So even in that first scene where they go onto the Trade Federation vessel and Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon are just beating tar on all the battle droids and just, stabbing their way through doors and stuff like that, I was like, that's cool. That's just really cool.
Well, and the fight with Darth Maul.
Well, and that's it. And then it culminates with like probably the best fight scene across all iterations. Am I missing any? Am I not thinking of one?
No, I think like the like I said before, the Yoda with the lightsaber was just comical.
It was absurd.
And absurd. And even Count Dooku, who just just cut his hands off already.
I mean, really, when we're talking about best sword fight ever, it's either the one from Phantom Menace or it's the one from the end of Revenge of the Sith between Anakin and Obi-Wan. But again, we word for word, we knew how that one was going to play out, right? You
knew he had to lose his limbs.
Yeah, so that one again was kind of a, it was done well, but it was just kind of weak sauce. When I look at this one, I think my only real sticking point, and again, I love seeing you. I love Ewan McGregor. He's a fantastic actor. I'm glad he's back. He was the best part of those prequels by a country mile. I think the part that is sort of, tedious to a point, especially, when they're going to drop 2 episodes at once, is he's not this cool Jedi that we saw in the Clone Wars. He's not this, brash kid that we saw in Phantom Menace. And he's just this sort of broken down, dispirited guy who's afraid to kick on his lightsaber. And I know that that's about building towards where he's eventually going to have to do it and all that. But that would be my only sort of nitpick so far, is just it would have been nice to, if we're going to go into this era, to have it be a little more like he was not himself, it just was a little bit of a letdown.
The swagger and the cock of the walk was gone.
He's it's funny because everyone's always like, oh, Anakin in the prequels and in the Clone Wars is so brash. So is Obi-Wan. He's got some serious BDE in the Clone Wars series. Like he's not, humble Jedi. He's a big swinging dude. Like he's got a lot of attitude. And so
and I think that was I was a bit surprised by that. Like in the scenes, like when he's going towards the ship in the end of the first episode, and then when he's on the planet in the second one, and he's kind of skulking around. Like he walked into the room and you knew he was in the room, kind of thing. It was sort of that's what I meant about the Jedi. They kind of it's a little different. The Empire kind of played well, when the Inquisitors show up on the planet, people just get the hell out of our way, kind of, and they actually say that, right? And then when the stormtroopers are marching through the other town, or the new planet, what's it called? Dayu, they're like clear a path kind of thing, and they kind of just march through, and when the Jedi kind of showed up in any sort of scene, they just kind of walk in like cops, you know what I mean? Like they walk in like they're
well, and not just they're not like they're cops. It's like they're carrying an arsenal with them, so everyone's just like, well, we better get out of here, because anything they do could kill us.
Or like bikers, like a bunch of bikers walk into a room, people shut the hell up, kind of thing. Like that's kind of what you expect from Jedi. Or like the Mandalorian, when the Mandalorian walks into a bar, people shut up,
And again, I think, we talked about the prequel problem. We talk about it all the time on this pod, but I think that's the other fundamental flaw. And I think that brings me back to where Jaime was coming, is just there can only ever be a certain amount of risk in these kind of things. We know Leia's not going to die. We know Bail's not going to die. We know that Obi-Wan's not going to die. We know that in spite of the fact of getting run through with a lightsaber, that the Grand Inquisitor's not going to die.
Unlike you, I forget that stuff when I'm watching this. Like I didn't think that there wasn't a threat to Ben.
There was no moment in there.
Owen. When she's holding the sword up to Owen and she's standing nose to nose with him, I felt I felt the tension,
Yeah,
even though I didn't kind of go.
That would be my concern, is just when you tell a prequel story where you know that people come out on the other side with all their limbs intact. Yeah. Again, if the actor who played Owen in the original series or in the first movie had worn an eye patch, but this one didn't, I'd be like, maybe this is how this guy gets his eye socket knocked out. But there's none of that stuff, and so. Yeah, that's the problem with prequels, is it always falls flat. I never felt like Leia was at risk. I never felt like Obi-Wan was at risk. I never felt like Owen was at risk. I never felt like Luke was at risk. It just all kind of felt like MacGuffins to get us to the point where we did, which is, oh my God, he found out about Vader. Now he's going to have a conflict with Vader. So... yeah, that would be just sort of again, I'm not going to pick the hell out of it. I do think there's lots of good stuff there. I do think that, again, it's wonderful to be back in the Star Wars universe. But anytime we work with prequels, we are always going to have this problem. If you're working with prequels, you're always going to have this glaring, we know what happens with these characters.
Well, this is what's nice about Clone Wars is that they took the time to tell different kind of stories. Yep. We at the end of it, we know that the Empire is going to come along, and Anakin's going to become Darth Vader as well. But they brought in Ahsoka Tano, and they brought in all the clone troopers, and Rex and all those kind of guys, and they give you other stories. They're telling other stories other than the main plot lines of this, right? And like you said, it would have been. It's nice that he has interactions with Owen and stuff like that. But is that really necessary to tell for this story? Other than the fact that he's sitting there monitoring this kid's growth, could they not have him go off and solve other problems, like help the farmer that's not making enough money or whatever? You know what I mean? They could. There are other places they could go, and then come back to this. They don't have to build this story. We already know the story. We already know the story of the conflict between. I like the fact that coming back to A New Hope, I like the fact that when Darth Vader and Obi-Wan Kenobi meet up in the hallway there, they haven't seen each other in a long while, like 30 years, it seems like. You know what I mean? Like they know each other from way back when, kind of thing. Like, I don't know, they went through Jedi Academy together, which they did, but you know what I mean? Like that sort of sense of I know you from a way back, there's a big galaxy, there's a universe of places they could go and do things, and they kind of meet up later at the end. Not that every 10 years they have a sword fight. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because you'd think that would get boring. Oh, not you again, kind of thing, right?
Yeah. No.
Because if you think about like the prequel story, the prequel problem, like when you hear the dialogue that they have in The New Hope, none of what we're watching now makes sense.
No, right? And that's the problem, is again that unless you meticulously write these things with the anticipation that you are one day going to do these things, it's so hard to do a prequel without looking like a fool. But again, it's ridiculous. There's no question I'm going to watch the next 4 episodes. There's no question that there's going to be good things from those things. Hopefully for the first time in a while, they can stick the landing on a finale for one of these things. We'll find out in 4 weeks. But again, for all the nits we pick, I believe, Tim, it is you're saying there's no such thing as bad Star Wars, except for the Rise of Skywalker. Oh, no, wait, that's what I say. Sorry.
Just be glad Tom Cruise isn't in it. Come on.
Yeah. I'm excited.
Right. So let's move on to watch list then.
A couple easy ones this week. So Stranger Things season 4 drops on Netflix today as well. It's 7 episodes, so it's sort of I think it's being billed as sort of the part 1 of season 4. The episodes are quite meaty. They are anywhere from about 1:15 to, I think the last episode's like 1 hour 40. So 100-minute episodes, that's not nothing. So it's only 7 episodes, but it really is. It's quantity wise, it's about 10 Disney Plus episodes. So it's pretty substantial. And I had to give my wife the recap because she had completely forgotten, because it's been so damn long since we saw season 3. There are recaps available on Netflix. They're a little 4-minute, here's the greatest hits, what you need to know about what happened with everybody. But I'm curious to see what happens, where they pick that story up and where it goes. Obviously they're building towards a crescendo. They said that they're going to wrap it up in the next year or two. So I'll be curious to see where they where they go from here with these kids from Indiana. The other thing I've got is next week we get The Boys season 3. I don't know if you guys have watched all the trailers and stuff, but God, is it ever look funny and good. I don't know if either of you guys did finally make the time to watch Diabolical, the cartoon series that they did in between.
No, not yet.
But no, I haven't seen that one.
There's time. It's actually not long. It's they're 15-minute episodes, and I think there's 6 or 8 of them. So it's actually not that long, all things being equal. But they are disgusting and hilarious, just like the boys that from which it is inspired. But yeah, I mean, that series, I don't know about you guys, but it blew me away last time. Like it was good in season 1, but it was great in season 2, and the the Homelander, the Butcher, like all the characters are so good, so well realized, so well acted. It's just one of my favorite shows. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes of that. And of course, it being Amazon, Stranger Things dropped all 7 episodes today. Boof, off you go. Good luck catching up before you get spoiled. The Boys will be debuting.
Netflix, you mean, right?
Sorry, Netflix. Yes. The Boys will be debuting on Amazon next week, but they're doing, I think, 3 episodes to start and then weekly after that. So it will sort of be a bit of a slow burn too, which is nice. I think I actually prefer that. So looking forward to that one a lot. I did chuck this one in because it just made me laugh. In the week of all Star Wars news, the folks at LG have released a Star Wars themed television, 65-inch LG C2 OLED Evo TV, limited to just 501 units in the United States, costing $2,500. It is.
So they're sold out already, is what you're saying.
100%. Right? Yeah, you'll never get one of these, but it's just funny. It's interesting that it's got the gallery mode, like some of the TVs have, where it sort of shows you, paintings and stuff when you're not watching TV. This one shows you the schematics for like the concept drawings for Star Wars and stuff like that. It's a kitschy piece, but it made me laugh, and it made me think, this is definitely something we should share with the listening audience. So we'll put this one in the show notes. You can have a look at the weird Star Wars branded LG OLED Evo television set. And the last thing I added in, which made Tim groan, is that today, as part of the announcements at Celebration, they unveiled a whole bunch of new Star Wars toys, including some very cool-looking new Black Series figures, and they announced a new wave of my very favorite ones, which are the Hasbro Star Wars Retro Collection series. So these are the figures that look very much like the figures from the 1970s and 80s. They are inarticulated. They are just rigid arms, rigid legs, and they look very much like they belong in the collection from the 1970s and 80s. They have announced a new wave of 6 figures. They are all from the Obi-Wan series. They have only unveiled the first one, which is the third sister, and so you can pre-order that one now. But they have said that there will be 6 series in this figures, and all of them will be based on the Obi-Wan series. Doing a little simple math there, Darth Vader, Obi-Wan, the third sister, the Grand Inquisitor, and 2 figures to be named later. Any predictions on what those other 2 are?
The other 2 characters? Or
yeah, I mean, there were 2 other characters from the Obi-Wan series. God, I hope it's not Uncle Owen. It could be 2 more of the Inquisitors. It could be some character we haven't met yet, but...
Leia?
Yeah, I mean, get the Leia and Luke as 10-year-olds 2-pack or something? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. 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 With the droids, yeah. With
the droids that Obi-Wan didn't own?
Yeah.
But
Obi-Wan, obviously, but... Yeah,
Obi-Wan, Vader... The Grand Inquisitor and the third sister are the kind of the no-brainer ones.
Yeah.
It could be the 5th brother. It could be the 4th sister that we've seen already. Again, with the Grand Inquisitor getting stabbed through, even if he's not dead, which we know he's not, we may not see him again in the series. We might be focusing on the other sisters and brothers, who I'm thinking might be just a smidge ticked off.
Right. So, hi, Modi. Good job. What do you got?
I was busy making use of my subscriptions to watch free, relatively new movies, and one completely brand new movie, I think, in first case here. I watched Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers on Disney Plus and Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on Paramount Plus, and they're actually a pretty good pairing. I watched them not back to back the same night, but one after the other successive nights.
So you know that it's Adam, what's his name? The 2 guys who hosted the Jimmy Kimmel show the other day were
Adam Carolla?
No, not Adam Carolla.
Are you talking about the voice actors for Chip and Dale? They're John Mulaney and Andy Samberg.
Andy Samberg, yeah. So the two of them were hosting because Jimmy Kimmel had COVID again, and so the two of them were hosting together, and they interviewed each other, and they both showed the same clip from the same Chip and Dale movie.
Nice.
Yeah. So it was good fun.
Is it good? I gotta admit, I was a Rescue Rangers fan back in the day, even though I was probably just a smidge too old for it. I love that series, and I gotta admit, I flagged that one for myself to watch sometime over the next couple of weeks. What'd you think, Jaime?
Yeah, I had to admit that I went in. I didn't intend to go into the movie because when I saw the trailer, I wasn't sold on it. I said I was a fan of the Rescue Rangers TV show as part of the Disney Afternoon growing up as a young lad, and this was not that. And then I saw all of the good hype on the interwebs, and I checked out Rotten Tomatoes and said, wait, what? It's doing that well? Okay. I guess it's worth a free watch on Disney Plus. Let me check this out. And I'd have to say it's probably best to compare it. So I do like it, to be really clear. And it's best to compare it to Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So if Who Framed Roger Rabbit is, in my opinion, a more adult kind of film, it is, Roger Rabbit is a film noir take on capitalism and structural racism and redlining. It's the very basics of Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
That's pretty bang on, yeah.
Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers is the slightly younger, not quite as adult. There's no like Jessica Rabbit kind of character, which is probably the biggest take. But it is essentially a buddy cop film, like 48 Hours or Rush Hour or some kind of buddy cop film with human trafficking underneath the story, but like kids friendly, So it's got some dark stuff when you're like, yo, this is pretty messed up, right? But like, I think it's perfectly fine and dandy to watch with kids. They're not going to really get that part of it.
So is there a spoiler-free way of explaining to me why one of them is cartoon and the other is 3D rendered?
Yeah, the part of the premise of them is that they've had their celebrity in the past, and they had a falling out, kind of like a breaking up of the band kind of thing. And in the intervening years, apparently it's hot to get CGI surgery, is what they call it. Kind of like getting Botox or, chest implants, whether pectoral or breast kind of implants. And they heavily reference Alvin and the Chipmunks as a stylistic choice for that. The live action CGI Alvin and the Chipmunks. So that's canonically why. And actually along that same lines, it is actually fairly impressive how many different kinds of animation media are represented in this film. Unlike Space Jam 2, which has a weird but incredible set of like just flexing from Warner Brothers of like all of these IP that exists under here. This movie not only has a huge flex of what Disney owns, but like they paid buckets of money to some other companies for access to their property. So it actually is, again, kind of like a spiritual successor to Roger Rabbit. It's if Roger Rabbit is the adult R-rated film, this is the like PG to maybe PG-13 at most young adults film version of that. So I enjoyed it. It was fun. I think it's a good love letter to the show. My second pick is Sonic the Hedgehog 2, which I did enjoy. I don't think I enjoyed it quite as much as the first Sonic the Hedgehog, but it's still a pretty solid showing. Tails is the flying two-tailed fox is okay, and I kind of feel like that's because the source material isn't that Tails is not a great character. Idris Elba as Knuckles, though, is brilliant. I love the Knuckles character. So I feel like this movie has a lot of good individual scenes. I just didn't really buy the way that they were stitched together, especially the human-centric parts. There's a little too much plot convenience for especially how the human-centric parts stitch things together, but it's still pretty enjoyable in a post-Sonic world kind of way.
So it's worthwhile watching the original Sonic movie?
Yeah, I definitely say watch the original Sonic movie. This one is... Cool.
It's an airplane movie, this one.
Yeah, it's closer to that. It's definitely one you should watch, if only for Idris Elba's Knuckles character.
Yeah.
Jim Carrey does a pretty decent job, but I think I like Jim Carrey's Dr. Robotnik in the first one a little bit better.
So Ozark just finished. I just finished watching season 6 part 2 of Ozarks, which is the final end of the whole series. And the whole premise of Ozark, essentially, Jonathan, you just started watching it, right?
Yes, please don't spoil anything.
Well, the whole premise. Okay, then the whole premise of of Ozarks is, you think you're out, and then they drag you back in again. That's all I have to say about that, right? But so having watched the final sort of run up to the end there, it kind of has a Sopranos moment at the end, but I won't give it away. It's a little disappointing, the end of the whole series, or where it ends up, but and maybe there are some things that are sort of predictable, but overall it's still a fantastic show. It's a great show to watch. Maybe there's a movie coming, who knows.
Wifey and I have watched I think we're maybe 4 or 5 episodes into season 1, but it's funny because I said I ask her at the end of every episode, so adult diapers yet? And she says no, not yet, but she did say the other day, no, but I kind of want to call in sick so we can watch more of it tomorrow. So we're getting there.
Having gone through watching it for 6 seasons, I can't imagine starting from season 1 and having to get to the season 6 without the adult diapers and the food delivery, and the kids, wandering around.
I will admit, it's one of those ones that I have had on my Netflix watch list for ages, because I do like a lot of the people in the cast, and I do think, it always seemed good to me, and, nobody's ever said a bad word about it. It's always been, oh, it's really good. It's really good. I have been intending to watch it for a long time. Finally, Sherry and I just finished watching the show that we had been watching for a long time, which was Schitt's Creek, and we got through that, and I was like, oh, okay, well, what do you want to watch next? She said, oh, well, Tim said this was good, we should watch this. We watched the first episode, and I was like, oh no, now I have to watch every episode with her, and it's going to take forever.
Oh, because we have to
watch it together, and when we make a point of trying to watch something together, when we can, but I'd say it's probably about 4 nights a week that the two of us have the same amount of time at the same time where we can sit down and watch something together. And so, it's going to take probably till August or so before we get through all of this. I was like, oh no, I just want a marathon. I said to her today, I'm like, oh, the new season of Stranger Things is coming on. And she was like, oh, cool. And I was like, but I am watching it. And she was like, what do you mean? I said, I am not watching all of Ozark first and then watching that, and I don't want to stop watching Ozark so that we can watch this, so that we can watch these things together. I said, can't we just watch these separately? She's like, well, that's a terrible attitude. I was like, well, this is the challenge that couples face, right? I know, Jaime, I know you've lived through this.
A different version of it, but it has the same effect. So rather than being blocked by, it sounds like your significant other wants to do them sequentially, mine does not like sequential, so we'll have 20 different series that we're 1 or 2 episodes into, and it drives me nuts. I'm like, no, let's just binge through one of them, finish it, and be done with it, and move on to the next one. But I don't want to spend 6 months going through these series. I want to just bang them out 1 week at a time.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I said to her was I said, it's kind of for the podcast. I feel like I should watch Stranger Things pretty quickly. I don't need to watch it in a week, but I kind of would like to get through it pretty quickly. And she was quite, ticked off that I was drawing a line in the sand.
It's for work.
I know. I'm like, the podcast is so important. The guys would be so let down. But yeah, she was like, I could watch it with you. And then it's funny because I said, okay, sweetie, I got to go downstairs and watch Obi-Wan. She's like, fine, I'm going to sit here and watch Stranger Things. I was like, yep, I deserve that. I totally deserve that. You're right. Totally deserved it. 100%. Yeah.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I did watch Everything Everywhere All at Once in IMAX. It's a different experience than just watching it on a smaller screen like we did when we first saw it.
Was it filmed in IMAX?
Still a great movie.
Was it filmed for IMAX?
Yes, it was filmed in IMAX. But the thing about it is, for some reason, it only played for one day in any one theater that I could find in the history of it. Right. So yeah, it was actually done for IMAX theaters, and as I said before, it was interesting because certain scenes are framed different ways. I mean, because with IMAX you get if you watch Dark Knight on IMAX, you'll see that most of the movie's filmed in 16:9 or whatever that ratio is, right? Letterbox.
Yep.
And then there are a few scenes where it goes to the full screen, right? Full IMAX, 4:3 or 4:5. Where does everyone need it? That sort of old television format, right? But what I noticed about this was odd because some of the scenes are like they have the black bars on the side, so it's kind of like the opposite of letterbox.
Yeah, it's like television box. Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of weird that way, in that sense. Like the scenes where the two rocks are talking to each other.
Yeah.
In the universe where life didn't evolve, that was like full screen panorama, amazing, view kind of thing, right? But other scenes like the regular scenes were just regular like movie, like letterbox kind of stuff, but occasionally, it was interesting. Like I'd have to go back and sort of analyze why they use certain framing, but you can only do it by watching the IMAX movie, which is ironic, right? Yeah. So, and the other movie I want to see, which is interesting, and I can see why Top Gun Maverick is coming out this weekend, because obviously it's Memorial Day weekend, Veterans Day weekend. What's the other name for it, Jaime? There's three of them. It's like Memorial Day is if you haven't been. No, it's something.
I see. I see what you mean when you say the three of them. It was confusing. So in the final Monday of May, I think is how it works, is Memorial Day, or maybe it's always like 29th, 30th. I forget how they do that. That's Memorial Day. So that's for the military folks who have passed, right? Like you're honoring their sacrifice and their memory. You've got Veterans Day, which is for everybody who's active military kind of thing and past military, right? So service folks.
Is it same day of the year or different day?
That's a good question. I always think of it as being November 10th or 11th.
Maybe it's always
November
11th is our Remembrance Day.
Yeah, it's 11th.
Yeah. I for some of these, I can't remember if they're actual specific days, or there's also a lot of weird observed type stuff in Irish stuff. I don't know what the third one is that you're talking about. The closest thing I can think of is Labor Day in September, but that's not. It's not military.
One. I thought Carol kind of sort of said it had three different names. But I've always known this as Memorial Day, the day after, because it's the week after we have our Victoria Day, which is Queen Victoria's birthday.
I mean, very quickly, the major holidays in the US of A are going to be New Year's Day, normally, Martin Luther King Day, Memorial Day, Independence Day might be the one you're thinking of there, maybe. Labor Day, Veterans Day, Thanksgiving Day, Christmas Day.
Yeah, no, okay. Yeah, I thought there was another one. All right, never mind. But I can see why this movie comes out on this weekend. But what's odd was because I having seen the trailer in IMAX, I do want to see, or that preview that we saw the other day. I am actually interested in seeing the movie just for the effects of the planes flying around. I don't know if I'll really care about the rest of the plot of the story, or Jennifer Connelly wouldn't be bad in IMAX too. But
she's not bad in any form.
Yeah. So and sort of the way that all of the actors that I've seen interviewed on this spent so much time in the planes that some of them actually went and got their pilot's license. That's how much time they spent actually flying these things, right? Making this movie. So, and just as a side note, I think last year Tom Cruise took James Corden and strapped him to himself and jumped out of a plane with a parachute, right? And the two of them went through the whole thing. This weekend, or this week's exploit was he took James Corden and put him in one of these jets, and then flew him around and did all the crazy, loops and barrel rolls and G-forces and all that kind of stuff. So it was kind of funny to see the two of them go through all that stuff, and they did it in two different planes, but it was kind of funny. But so I'm interested to see this movie in the theaters. But what was interesting about that was I was looking at the times, because it came out today, and so I wanted to see, right, I have a few IMAX theaters around me. One is near Jonathan's house. A couple of them are downtown Toronto. And it's interesting to see where it's not playing in IMAX in some theaters, and it is playing in IMAX in other theaters. And then, but looking at the number of theaters that are showing, like screenings that they have of this show, it's less than Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, which is odd because how many weeks ago did that come out?
3,
4 weeks.
Yeah.
Like, and looking at the seating, like, when you look, you can see the available seating. They're not like they're showing 20 screenings of Doctor Strange to like 4 or 5 screenings of Top Gun, which makes no sense. Like, other than like why, like, like they're not going to sell the seats for Doctor Strange. I would have thought everybody who wanted to see that movie would have already seen it, right?
Given the fact that when we saw it, it was pretty ghost towny in there, other than us.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I can't imagine, filling out. I did happen to look at one of the theater showings today for Maverick, and like the whole theater is solid. Like, you're talking like that's like a Danger Will Robinson kind of scenario in my mind, right? But anyway, yeah. So those are my picks, and I guess that's it for another week. So hey, Jonathan, if people want to get in touch with you, where would they find you?
I'm on Twitter and Instagram as @JPKNews.
Alrighty, and YouTube as well?
YouTube, you can follow me at Jonathan Kuline, because I'm working very close to 10,000 followers on my channel now. I would love to have you there.
Nice. Good. And Jaime, how about you?
I'm on Twitter as @DevWithTheHair.
My name is Tim Mitra, TIMMITRA. On the Twitter machine is where you'll find me. So, till next time, we'll see you in the future. Bye.
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 You've been listening to the Spotcast podcast. If you want to find out more about the podcast or see the episode show notes, visit the Spotcast website at spotcast.com. You can get in touch with us on the website or follow us on Twitter at Spotcast. If you have feedback or questions, send us a tweet with the hashtag AskSpotcast. If you like the show, please consider recommending us to a friend, writing a review on iTunes, or pledging any amount at patreon.com/Spotcast. You can find details on how to help us on our website, spotcast.com/sponsor us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the future.
$10,000, is that just from all the music videos you've been putting up? Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's funny how it broke, because I was posting videos again. I
like are you monetizing now because you've got
because the only thing that I'm monetizing is because all the songs are copyright, right? Of course, if you film a concert video, the only one that I get money off of is I have a video from when Billie Eilish came and played Toronto. She played a 600-person venue on it's like her second time she was ever in Toronto. Sherry and I happened to get tickets and went and saw her when she was 16 play a show, and it was on her mom's birthday. So she sings "Happy Birthday" to her mom, for which I make about 50 cents a month, because it's been watched thousands of times. People really want to watch a 1-minute video of Billie Eilish singing "Happy Birthday" to her mom, so much so that I get paid for it every month. But other than that, it gives you an option when you're uploading videos to demonetize them. And I always select that as the default, because I do not own any of these songs. I am just capturing them when I go to shows, mostly because I'm very tall. My wife is very not tall, and she can't see everything. So I make a video so that she can be like, oh, that's what their legs look like. So, yeah.
So you can put Spotcast swag on your channel, because I'm trying to get to a point where I can't do any T-shirts and stuff until I have 1,000 followers on our channel.
You let me know how that's done, and I'm here for you.
All right. Yeah,
I have no idea. Yeah, I'm at like 9,800 and change.
You need to be at 1,000 followers. Like, so you're like 9,000 opportunities away from having swag on your channel.
Yeah, Xavier told me the other day, because he was laughing because he's like, cannot believe your channel has that many follows on it. And I said, you know what it is that we went to a couple of shows, and I was making some videos, some better than others, but we went to go see, like 4 years ago, we saw an up and coming young artist by the name of Dua Lipa, who has since gone on to be one of the biggest pop artists on the planet. And So I've made like 2 or 3 videos or 3 or 4 videos that night of her down at Echo Beach dancing and singing and the whole bit. And each of those videos has like over 1 million views.
Wow, you have no playlist. I got to show you how to optimize your.
Oh, I'm sure you could. Again, for me, I am literally putting stuff up there so that I can send a link to my wife and say, see how good the show was from up here.
Yeah, from people who could see it. Yeah. I do the same thing. I mean, I post things that I want to see the Pixies play "Where Is My Mind" for sure, right? But I post things to my channel that are obviously some of them are episodes from More Than Just Code, but like I just published one yesterday, by the way, Jaime. But like a lot of times it's like Xanadu played by those guys.
Primus,
Primus,
yeah. I've got that slotted. It hasn't. So I've got a bit of a backlog on videos, so I just set them all basically to debut 1 at noon every day for the next 3 weeks from all the stuff that I've seen this spring. So I just worked my way through Churches, and then Lord, Broken Social Scene. I think Lights is now going up, and then there's still a few concerts behind of shows. But the Primus I did record.
Oh, you know what we didn't talk about?
What's that?
We didn't talk. You're a fan of Depeche Mode, right?
I know. Andy Fletcher died yesterday.
Yeah, and then Alan White from the Plastic Ono Band, and also. And
Ray Liotta. Yeah, it's been a bad week.
Yeah, Ray Liotta, that was an odd one.
Yeah, again, I had not, I must admit, seen a lot of his movies in the last number of years, but I mean, God, Goodfellas just made him for life, right? Like one of the best performances in one of the best movies of all time. I mean, it's just, it's an essential movie. It really is. And it's been so, it's crossed so far into the zeitgeist now that like people do, like The Simpsons did a Goodfellas episode, Family Guy did a Goodfellas, like it's just, it's part of the culture now, that Ray Liotta voiceover, right? I always knew I wanted to be a gangster. Ever since I was a little kid, I always wanted to be a gangster. Yeah, it's I saw Fletch died yesterday. That was it was shocking, and he was only 60. So I mean,
well, they were just going to go on tour, weren't they?
Yeah, I think so. And it's funny because Alan Wilder had already quit the band like 20 years ago because he was just burned out because they were all like massive drug addicts and stuff for a while there, and so he quit, and so it was just a trio, and then now Fletch is gone, and I mean, obviously Dave and Martin are sort of the heart of the band, but it's just it's such a huge bummer when I'm sure you've experienced this more so than me, but it's you get to that point of like more and more of your sort of boyhood idols are kicking the bucket, and not in dying in car crashes or drug overdoses, but dying of old age. It's a huge bummer.
Yeah, and not really old age.
No, exactly. Like 60s, that's a crime. Like, God, that's way too young to be gone. But yeah, no, it's a bummer.